When my own sister looked me dead in the eye and said I lacked the executive polish to be vice president, handing the promotion to her grossly underqualified husband. Instead, I did not scream or cry. I simply smiled, slid my corporate keycard across the mahogany table, and walked out. 4 days later, my phone screen lit up with 100 missed calls as their entire empire began to burn to the ground. My name is Maya. I am 33 years old, and for the past 8 years I have been the invisible backbone of Anderson Public Relations. We were sitting in the glass-walled executive boardroom on the 30th floor of our downtown Atlanta office. The Friday morning sunlight was streaming through the floor-to-ceiling windows, casting long shadows across the polished mahogany table. I had my tablet open in front of me, displaying the quarterly revenue reports. The numbers were undeniable. My division, the digital strategy and analytics sector, had brought in 80% of the firm's new revenue this year. I had personally secured our top 3 accounts, including the massive Vanguard lifestyle brand. I had worked 80-hour weeks, missed holidays, and sacrificed my personal life to ensure those clients stayed happy. My older sister, Kiara, sat at the head of the table. At 36, she was the pristine image of corporate perfection, wearing a tailored white suit, her hair pulled back into a flawless silk press. Kiara was the chief executive officer, a title she inherited directly from our mother Denise, who sat to her right. Our mother was a woman who valued social standing and country club optics above all else. She had always made it clear that Kiara was the golden child, the daughter who did everything right, who married the right kind of man, and who maintained the perfect image for the Atlanta high society circles she cared so much about. I was the workhorse, the daughter who stayed late in the trenches, pulling the late nights, fixing the crisis campaigns, and making sure the company did not sink. Sitting across from me was Liam, my sister, Kiara's husband. Liam was a 37-year-old white man who had bounced around 3 different mid-level finance jobs before Kiara convinced my mother to bring him into the family firm last year. He wore expensive suits and used corporate buzzwords like synergy and paradigm shift, but he could not read a basic analytics dashboard if his life depended on it. He spent his days taking 2-hour lunches and playing golf with potential clients who never seemed to actually sign with us. Whenever a project required actual heavy lifting, he would conveniently delegate the work to my team and then stand at the front of the room during the client presentation to take all the credit. I shifted in my leather chair, feeling a sense of quiet anticipation. Today was the day they were supposed to announce the new vice president of strategy. I had earned this. I had built the entire strategy department from scratch. I had brought the company out of the dark ages of traditional media and transformed us into a digital powerhouse. My mother tapped her gold pen against the table, signaling that the meeting was beginning. Kiara stood up, projecting that practiced, authoritative voice she used when she wanted to sound like a visionary. "We have seen tremendous growth this quarter," she began, her eyes sweeping over the room, but never quite landing on me. "But to take Anderson Public Relations to the next level, we need strong, dynamic leadership at the executive level. We need someone who can represent the face of this company to our elite clients." I closed my tablet, giving her my full attention, waiting to hear my name. "Therefore," Kiara continued, a tight smile forming on her lips, "I am proud to announce that our new vice president of strategy will be Liam." The air left my lungs. The room went completely silent, save for the hum of the air conditioning. I stared at my sister, waiting for the punchline, but her face was perfectly serious. My mother was beaming, clapping her hands together with genuine delight. Liam leaned back in his chair, adjusting his expensive tie with a smug look of satisfaction that made my stomach turn. "Liam," I asked, keeping my voice perfectly level, "you are giving the strategy division to Liam. He has never run a single campaign. He does not even know how to access the client portal." My mother sighed loudly, a sound she reserved specifically for my perceived shortcomings. "Maya, please do not be difficult. Your sister is making a business decision, not a personal one. You should be congratulating your brother-in-law." "It is entirely a business decision," Kiara said, folding her hands on the table. "Maya, you are great at the back-end stuff. You are a brilliant worker bee. But the vice president role requires a certain executive polish. It requires a vision and a presence, that frankly you just do not possess. You are too blunt with the clients. You do not fit the image we are trying to project for the firm future. I sat there absorbing her words. Executive polish. It was the same coded language my mother had used my entire life to tell me I was too dark, too outspoken, too natural to be the face of their pristine brand. They wanted my labor. They wanted the millions of dollars my campaigns brought in, but they did not want me sitting at the head of the table. They wanted to keep me hidden in the background while Liam paraded around as the face of my success. Liam slid a crisp sheet of paper across the mahogany table toward me. It was the new organizational chart. I looked down at the boxes and lines. At the top was Kiara as Chief Executive Officer. Right below her was Liam as Vice President of Strategy, and branching down from him a small box with my name, Senior Account Director. I know this is an adjustment, Maya Liam said, using that condescending tone of a man who had been handed everything he ever wanted. But I really need you to be a team player here. We have some big goals for the next quarter, and I am going to need you to bring me up to speed on the Vanguard account by Monday. I will be taking over as their primary point of contact. He wanted to take my biggest client, the client I had spent 2 years cultivating, and claim the relationship for himself to justify his new title. He wanted me to hand over the keys to the castle so he could lock me in the basement and take the credit for the gold I had mined. My mother leaned forward, resting her elbows on the table. We are a family, Maya. We support each other. Liam is going to take this company to new heights, and you are going to help him do it. It is time to put your pride aside and do what is best for the Anderson legacy. For a moment, I just looked at the three of them. My mother, who saw me only as a tool to elevate her favorite daughter. My sister, who was willing to sacrifice the integrity of her business to stroke her husband's ego. And Liam, the mediocre man who felt completely entitled to the fruits of my labor. Years ago, this betrayal would have broken me. I would have argued, cried, defended my worth, and begged them to see my value. But sitting there in that cold glass boardroom, I realized something incredibly powerful. You cannot prove your worth to people who benefit from keeping you beneath them. And more importantly, they had absolutely no idea who they were talking to. They did not know that for the past 4 years, while they were attending gala dinners and taking long weekend vacations, I had been working until 3 in the morning building my own company. They did not know that Aura Analytics, my independent digital firm, had just hit an $8 million valuation. They did not know that the proprietary software they relied on to service their clients actually belonged to me. I had built it, I owned the licenses, and I had been letting them use it out of a misplaced sense of family loyalty. They thought they had trapped me. They thought I needed this job, this title, their approval. I looked down at the organizational chart Liam had given me. I calmly folded it in half, and then in half again, placing it neatly beside my water glass. I am not going to be a team player, Liam, I said softly. Kiara frowned, her authoritative facade slipping slightly. Maya, do not throw a tantrum. You are still making a very good salary. You should be grateful you even have a seat in this room. I am not throwing a tantrum, Kiara, I replied. My voice was steady, completely empty of the anger they expected to see. In fact, I have never felt more clear-headed in my entire life. I closed my tablet. I unplugged my laptop, wrapping the cord with deliberate, slow movements. The silence in the room shifted from triumphant to confused. My mother watched me with narrowed eyes. What are you doing, Maya? My mother demanded, her voice sharp. Sit back down. We are not finished discussing the transition. Yes, we are, I said, standing up from the leather chair. I picked up my laptop bag and slung it over my shoulder. I reached into my blazer pocket, pulled out my heavy plastic corporate keycard, and placed it flat on the center of the mahogany table. I slid it forward. It glided across the smooth wood, coming to a stop right in front of Liam's folded hands. I resign, I said, looking directly into Kiara's shocked eyes. Effective immediately. Liam let out a nervous laugh. You cannot just quit. You have the Vanguard presentation next week. You have client deliverables. You are the Vice President of Strategy now, Liam. I smiled, a genuine warm smile that clearly unnerved him. I am sure you have the executive polish to figure it out. You are making a huge mistake, Maya. My mother warned, her voice rising in panic and anger. If you walk out that door, do not expect to come crawling back when you run out of money. We will not bail you out. I do not need your bailouts, Mom. I never did. I turned my back on them and walked toward the glass doors. I could hear Kiara demanding that I stop telling me I was acting unprofessionally, that I was burning bridges. I pushed the heavy glass door open, stepping out of the boardroom and into the quiet hallway. I did not look back. I walked straight to the elevator, pressed the lobby button, and waited. When the elevator doors closed, sealing me off from their voices, a massive weight lifted off my chest. I walked out of the building into the warm Atlanta morning air. I got into my car, gripped the steering wheel, and let out a long, deep breath. I had just walked away from a six-figure salary and my entire toxic family structure. But I was not scared. I started the engine, pulled out of the parking garage, and drove home in complete silence. They thought they had won, but they had just signed their own death warrant. The countdown had officially begun. The moment I unlocked the door to my midtown apartment, I felt an overwhelming sense of peace. I tossed my keys on the granite counter, kicked off my heels, and poured myself a tall glass of sparkling water. My phone was already buzzing continuously on the kitchen island. Texts from Kiara were rolling in, telling me I was making a massive fool of myself. Texts from my mother Denise followed, warning me that I would be begging for my job back by Monday morning. I did not reply to a single one. I put the phone on silent, turned it face down, and walked directly into my home office. I sat down at my desk and opened my personal laptop. The screen illuminated my face, reflecting the dashboard of my closely guarded secret. For the last 4 years, while my family was busy attending high society galas in Buckhead and taking credit for my late nights, I had been quietly building Aura Analytics. It was an elite digital marketing and data strategy firm that I founded right here from this very desk. They thought I was just a senior account director drowning in their shadow, but they had no idea I already owned an empire. I checked my company financials with a deep sense of satisfaction. Aura Analytics had just crossed an $8 million valuation. We had a remote team of 20 brilliant developers, data scientists, and brand strategists scattered across the country. I had deliberately kept my name off the public-facing website, operating as a silent founder to avoid any conflict of interest with Anderson Public Relations. But the truth was, Anderson Public Relations only survived because of the proprietary software I had built and integrated into their outdated systems. When I slid my keycard across that mahogany table, I did not just resign. I revoked their access to the very engine that kept their company running. 2 days later, Sunday rolled around. In my family skipping, Denise's mandatory Sunday dinner was considered a mortal sin. I decided to go. Not to apologize, not to beg for my job back, but to look them in the eye one last time before the storm hit. My mother lived in a sprawling brick house in an exclusive gated community. When I walked into the formal dining room, the heavy scent of roasted chicken, macaroni and cheese, and collard greens hung in the air. Kiara and Liam were already seated at the table, drinking expensive red wine and looking incredibly smug. My mother did not even look up from carving the roast when I took my seat. She let the silence stretch for a long, uncomfortable moment, ensuring I felt the weight of her disapproval before finally turning her sharp gaze on me. "I hope you have spent the weekend thinking about your childish behavior, Maya," she said, her voice dripping with condescension. Walking out of an executive meeting is not just unprofessional, it is a direct insult to this family and everything your father built before he passed. I calmly placed my linen napkin on my lap. I resigned, Mom. There is nothing childish about leaving a position where I am undervalued to report to someone who lacks basic industry knowledge. Liam let out a loud scoff, slamming his wineglass down on the table. "Lacks basic knowledge," he repeated, shaking his head with a condescending chuckle. "Maya, I have an MBA. I have 10 years of finance experience. You just manage social media campaigns and client feelings. Strategy requires real business acumen." I looked at Liam. He genuinely believed his own delusions. "Liam," I said, keeping my voice perfectly even, "you do not know the difference between a conversion rate and a bounce rate. You cannot run a digital strategy division on corporate buzzwords and golf course handshakes." "That is enough," Kiara snapped, slamming her hand on the table. "You are just bitter because Liam got the title you wanted. But this is exactly why you were passed over. You are too emotional. You do not have the temperament for leadership. Liam spent all weekend reviewing the Vanguard lifestyle account. He has a brilliant new vision for their quarterly review on Wednesday. A brilliant new vision! I almost laughed out loud. The Vanguard lifestyle account was a $2.5 million retainer. They were our biggest client and they were notoriously demanding. I had spent 2 years customizing a highly specific analytics dashboard just for their marketing team. Without my back-end software and my direct relationship with their chief marketing officer, Liam, was walking into a minefield completely blind. Well, Denise said, serving herself a generous portion of chicken, I hope you saved your money, Maya, because Liam and Kiara have graciously agreed to let you return to the firm as a senior coordinator. It is a demotion, of course, but it is the only way you will ever survive in this industry. You do not have the network to make it on your own. You need the Anderson name. You should be thanking your sister for being so forgiving. I looked at my mother, a woman who had spent my entire life making me feel small, so her golden child could shine brighter. I looked at my sister, who had built her CEO title on the back of my exhaustion. And I looked at Liam, the mediocre white man who felt entitled to steal my crown. I picked up my fork, took a deliberate bite of macaroni and cheese, and smiled. The food is delicious, Mom, I said, ignoring her entire speech. But I will not be returning to Anderson Public Relations. Not as a coordinator, not as a director, not ever. Denise's face turned purple with rage. If you walk out on this family, you are dead to me, she warned, her voice shaking with fury. You will not get a single dime from us. You will be blacklisted in this city. Keep your money, I said, standing up from the table. I left my plate full, grabbed my purse, and walked out the front door. It was the last family dinner I would ever attend. Monday morning arrived, and I initiated a strict no-contact rule. I blocked Kiara, Liam, and my mother on my personal phone. I routed all emails from the Anderson domain directly to a spam folder. I woke up at 5 in the morning, made a strong cup of coffee, and dove completely into scaling Aura Analytics. We had just secured a massive government contract, and my team was working flawlessly. The freedom of focusing on my own wealth instead of making my sister richer was intoxicating. My stress levels plummeted. For the first time in years, I slept through the night without grinding my teeth. Tuesday and Wednesday passed in a blur of productive, uninterrupted work. I did not check my family's social media. I did not wonder how Liam was handling the transition. I knew exactly what was happening in their office. The custom software interface I had built for the firm was tied to my personal administrator credentials. When I left, the automated reporting paused. The client dashboards froze. The entire nervous system of Anderson Public Relations had effectively flatlined. Thursday morning, exactly 4 days after I slid my keycard across the boardroom table, my phone lit up like a slot machine. I was sitting in my home office reviewing a new contract when I noticed the screen flashing frantically. I picked up the device. I had 100 missed calls. 30 from Kiara, 40 from my mother, 30 from Liam. There were dozens of text messages pouring in by the second. I opened my blocked message folder out of pure curiosity. The progression of panic in their messages was a masterpiece of human desperation. The first few messages from Kiara were sent on Wednesday afternoon, right after Liam quarterly review with Vanguard Lifestyle. Maya, call me back immediately. Vanguard is asking for the back-end analytics and Liam cannot access your portal. Where are the login credentials? 2 hours later, the tone shifted. Maya, this is not funny. You are deliberately sabotaging company property. Give Liam the password now or I am calling the police. I laughed, sipping my coffee. Company property. The software was registered under Aura Analytics. I had let them use it for free because I was trying to help my family succeed. They had no legal right to it whatsoever. The messages from Thursday morning, however, were sheer unfiltered terror. Maya, please pick up. Vanguard just pulled their retainer. They are terminating the contract. Liam tried to present without the data, and they walked out of the meeting. Please, Maya, we need you to fix this. Name your price. We will give you the vice president title. Just call me back. My mother had left a frantic voicemail. I pressed play, listening to her voice tremble through the phone's speaker. Maya, where are you? You need to come down to the office right now. Liam made a terrible mistake. The clients are leaving. Kiara is having a panic attack. You have to save the family business. We are a family, Maya. Please come fix your mess. My mess. I leaned back in my chair, staring at the ceiling. They had taken my clients, handed them to an incompetent man, called me a failure, and then blamed me when their glass house shattered. Vanguard Lifestyle was responsible for 40% of the firm operating budget. Without that $2.5 million retainer, Anderson Public Relations could not make payroll. They could not pay the lease on that fancy 30th floor office. They were bleeding out, and they knew it. I deleted the voicemail. I did not call them back. I did not negotiate. I simply closed my phone and went back to work. If Liam had the executive polish to be vice president, he could polish the sinking ship all by himself. 2 days had passed since I walked out of that glass boardroom. It was Sunday afternoon, and in my family, skipping my mother mandatory Sunday dinner was considered a mortal sin. I decided to go. I did not go to apologize or to beg for my job back. I went because I wanted to look them in the eye one last time before the storm I had set in motion finally made landfall. I pulled my car through the imposing wrought iron gates of my mother upscale neighborhood in Buckhead. The sprawling brick houses with perfectly manicured lawns were monuments to the kind of superficial success my mother valued above all else. I parked in the circular driveway, took a deep breath, and walked up to the heavy oak front doors. The moment I stepped inside, the heavy scent of roasted chicken, candied yams, and collard greens hit me. It was the smell of my childhood, but the atmosphere in the house was anything but warm. I walked into the formal dining room and found the scene already set. Kiara and Liam were seated at the long mahogany table. Liam was pouring a very expensive bottle of red wine, looking incredibly smug in his designer polo shirt. Kiara was adjusting her diamond tennis bracelet, laughing loudly at something he had just said. My mother Denise walked in from the kitchen carrying a silver serving platter. She did not even look up when I took my seat at the far end of the table. She let the silence stretch for a long, uncomfortable moment, ensuring I felt the heavy weight of her disapproval before she finally turned her sharp gaze on me. I hope you have spent the weekend thinking about your childish behavior, Maya, she said. Her voice dripped with that specific brand of condescension she had perfected over 3 decades. Walking out of an executive meeting is not just unprofessional. It is a direct insult to this family and everything your father built before he passed away. I calmly placed my linen napkin on my lap and looked directly at her. I resigned, Mom. There is nothing childish about leaving a position where I am undervalued, so I can report to someone who lacks basic industry knowledge. Liam let out a loud scoff, slamming his wine glass down on the table. Lacks basic knowledge, he repeated, shaking his head with a condescending chuckle. Maya, I have a master's degree in business administration. I have 10 years of finance experience. You just manage social media campaigns and client feelings. Real corporate strategy requires actual business acumen. I looked at Liam. He genuinely believed his own delusions. I watched this mediocre white man sitting at my family table wearing the title I had earned with my blood and sweat. He was so confident in his stolen authority. Liam, I said, keeping my voice perfectly even. You do not know the difference between a conversion rate and a bounce rate. You cannot run a digital strategy division on corporate buzzwords and golf course handshakes. You have no idea how the back-end analytics software even operates. That is enough, Kiara snapped, slamming her hand on the table. You are just bitter because Liam got the title you wanted. But this is exactly why you were passed over. You are too emotional. You do not have the temperament for executive leadership. Liam spent all weekend reviewing the Vanguard Lifestyle account. He has a brilliant new vision for their quarterly review on Wednesday. A brilliant new vision. I almost laughed out loud right there at the dinner table. The Vanguard Lifestyle account was a $2.5 million retainer. They were our biggest and most notoriously demanding client. I had spent 2 years customizing a highly specific analytics dashboard just for their marketing team. Without my proprietary back-end software and my direct relationship with their chief marketing officer, Liam was walking into a minefield completely blind. He was bringing a grand vision to a client who only cared about hard data. Well, Denise said, serving herself a generous portion of chicken, I hope you saved your money, Maya. Because Liam and Kiara have graciously agreed to let you return to the firm as a senior coordinator. It is a demotion, of course, but it is the only way you will ever survive in this industry. I stared at my mother in absolute disbelief. She was offering me a demotion as if it were a life raft. You do not have the network to make it on your own, Denise continued, pointing her fork at me. You need the family name to open doors. You should be thanking your sister right now for being so forgiving. Most CEOs would have had you blacklisted in the city by Friday afternoon. I looked at my mother. This was a woman who had spent my entire life making me feel small, so her golden child could shine brighter. I looked at my sister, who had built her entire reputation as a visionary CEO on the back of my exhaustion. And I looked at Liam, who felt completely entitled to steal my crown and offer me a jester hat in return. I picked up my fork, took a deliberate bite of macaroni and cheese, and chewed it slowly. The food tasted like ash, but I swallowed it anyway. I wiped my mouth with my napkin and offered them a calm, pleasant smile. The food is delicious, Mom, I said, ignoring her entire speech. But I will not be returning to the public relations firm. Not as a coordinator, not as a director, not ever. Denise's face turned a deep shade of purple. The polite high society mask completely melted away, revealing the raw anger underneath. If you walk out on this family, you are dead to me, she warned, her voice shaking with fury. You will not get a single dime from us. When you fail, and you will fail, do not come crying to my doorstep. You are making the biggest mistake of your life, Kiara added, leaning forward. You think you are so smart, but you are nothing without the infrastructure I built. You are going to ruin your career over a petty grudge. I am not holding a grudge, Kiara, I replied softly. I am simply removing myself from a situation that no longer serves me. I stood up from the table. I left my plate full, grabbed my purse from the back of the chair, and pushed my chair in. The three of them watched me in stunned silence. They had expected tears. They had expected a screaming match. They had expected me to fold under the threat of being cut off financially. They simply could not compute the fact that I was walking away without a fight. Keep your money, Mom, I said, looking at her one last time. I never needed it anyway. I turned and walked out of the formal dining room. I heard Liam mutter something derogatory under his breath, but I did not stop. I walked out the heavy oak front doors and stepped into the cool evening air. As I walked down the driveway to my car, I felt a physical weight lift from my shoulders. It was the last family dinner I would ever attend. The drive back to my apartment was peaceful. I did not turn on the radio. I just listened to the quiet hum of the engine and the sound of my own steady breathing. When I got inside, I walked straight to my kitchen counter and picked up my phone. It was time to initiate a strict no-contact rule. I opened my contacts and blocked Kiara. I blocked Liam. I blocked my mother. I went into my email settings and routed all correspondence from the family firm domain directly to a spam folder. I completely severed the digital cords connecting me to their toxic ecosystem. I woke up the next morning at 5. I made a strong pot of dark roast coffee and sat down at my desk. I opened my laptop and dove completely into scaling Aura Analytics. My firm had recently secured a massive government contract, and I needed to finalize the onboarding protocols for my new data scientists. My team was working flawlessly. The freedom of focusing entirely on my own wealth instead of making my sister richer was intoxicating. My stress levels plummeted instantly. For the first time in years, I was not managing client panic attacks or covering up Liam's costly mistakes. I was just building my empire. I slept through the night without grinding my teeth. I ate proper meals. I felt like a human being again. Tuesday and Wednesday passed in a blur of productive, uninterrupted work. I did not check my family's social media pages to see if they were posting subliminal insults. I did not wonder how Liam was handling the transition. I knew exactly what was happening in their office. The custom software interface I had built for the firm was tied to my personal administrator credentials. When I left, the automated reporting paused. The client dashboards froze. The entire nervous system of their public relations firm had effectively flatlined. Liam was probably staring at a blank screen trying to figure out how to generate a simple analytics report, while the Vanguard lifestyle executives waited in the boardroom. I smiled at the thought, taking another sip of my coffee. They had told me I would never survive without their handouts. They had told me I lacked the vision to lead, but they were about to learn a very hard, very expensive lesson about who actually held the power in that family. I closed my eyes and leaned back in my chair, enjoying the profound silence of my home office. The storm was coming, and I was safely watching it from the shore. I spent the rest of the week reviewing expansion plans for Aura Analytics. We were hiring a new tier of account executives, and I was personally vetting their portfolios. I wanted a team built on merit, not nepotism. I wanted people who understood that hard work actually meant something. The contrast between my vibrant, growing company and the stagnant, decaying environment I had left behind was staggering. I realized that my family had not just been holding me back professionally, they had been draining my spirit. They had convinced me that my loyalty to them was more important than my loyalty to myself. But that illusion was broken now. I was finally stepping into the light, and there was no power on earth that could force me back into their shadow. Stepping into the light meant leaving the noise behind entirely. By Monday morning, the silence in my apartment was no longer just an absence of sound. It was a tangible presence, a heavy, luxurious blanket of peace that I wrapped around myself. For the first time in my professional life, I woke up without the dread of checking my email to see what disaster my sister had created or what client my brother-in-law had offended. I walked into my kitchen, poured a cup of dark roast coffee, and stood by the window looking out over the Atlanta skyline. Down there, somewhere in a high-rise building, my family was walking into their offices. They were probably still laughing about my departure, convinced I was sitting at home crying over my lost title. They had always underestimated me. My mother, Denise, used the concept of family loyalty as a weapon. She wanted the shiny magazine covers and the society page features for Kiara, but she needed my calloused hands to build the pedestal. For years I had allowed it because I believed that uplifting my family was my ultimate duty. That illusion was completely shattered now. I sat down at my desk and opened the command center for Aura Analytics. My digital agency was not just a side project. It was a finely tuned machine running on precision and data. I hopped on a virtual meeting with my lead developer Jamal and my head of operations Gabrielle. We had been preparing a massive pitch for a federal contract, and the final decision was coming down this week. Jamal shared his screen showing the predictive modeling we had built for the proposal. The numbers were flawless. Gabrielle walked me through the execution timeline. We were operating at a level of efficiency that the family public relations firm could not even dream of. In my family business, every decision had to be filtered through my mother and her massive ego, followed by my sister and her deep insecurities. At Aura Analytics, we functioned purely on merit and results. As we wrapped up the meeting, I felt a surge of genuine pride. I had built this from nothing. I did not inherit a title. I did not marry into a position. I coded the algorithms, drafted the proposals, and stayed up until dawn learning everything I could about data architecture. While my team prepared the final federal documents, my mind briefly wandered to the ticking time bomb I had left behind. The reality of their public relations firm was that it was a hollow shell. Kiara was great at hosting cocktail parties and shaking hands with local politicians, but she did not understand the digital landscape. She still viewed marketing through the lens of print media and traditional networking. When our clients started demanding real-time data tracking and consumer behavior analytics, I was the one who built the infrastructure to provide it. I had created a proprietary software suite specifically for our top-tier accounts. I called the system the Oracle. It aggregated data across dozens of platforms and generated real-time reports that showed our clients exactly how their money was performing. But here was the crucial detail that my sister and her husband never bothered to understand. The Oracle did not run on the company servers. It ran on a private cloud network registered to my personal developer account. I had paid for the hosting myself. I had written every line of code. For security reasons, the system required two-factor authentication tied directly to my personal devices. I never gave the firm the master administrative keys because they never asked for them. Liam and Kiara assumed the software just existed like running water or electricity. They thought my job was simply pulling the numbers and putting them into pretty presentation folders. When I surrendered my keycard and walked out of that boardroom, I did not just leave the building. I logged out of my administrative accounts. I severed the data pipelines. I could picture Liam perfectly. It was Monday afternoon, and he was likely sitting in his new leather chair, trying to access the client portal. He would be slamming his hands against his keyboard, clicking on dead links and staring at a frozen login screen. He would be sweating through his tailored suit, realizing that the magic buttons he relied on were completely gone. On Tuesday, the real validation arrived. My screen lit up with a secure notification from the Federal Procurement Portal. I held my breath as I opened the encrypted message. Aura Analytics had been officially awarded a $4 million contract to manage digital outreach for a national housing initiative. I leaned back in my chair and let out a breathless laugh. $4 million. With this single contract, the valuation of my company would skyrocket. I immediately called Jamal and Gabrielle to share the news. We celebrated over the phone, mapping out the expansion of our server capacity and the hiring of 5 new data scientists. We were no longer just an elite boutique agency. We were becoming an industry powerhouse. That night, I ordered an expensive dinner from my favorite restaurant and poured a glass of champagne. I toasted to myself, to my freedom, and to the empire I was building in the shadows. I felt entirely, completely untouchable. By when the contrast between my life and the impending doom of my family firm was almost poetic. Wednesday was the day Liam was scheduled to give the quarterly strategy presentation to Vanguard Lifestyle. Vanguard was our crown jewel. They were a massive health and wellness brand with an annual retainer of $2.5 million. Their chief marketing officer was a brilliant, no-nonsense woman who saw right through corporate fluff. She demanded granular daily metrics on consumer engagement across 12 different demographics. I used to pull those reports manually at 2 in the morning, so Liam could stand up at 10 in the morning and take the credit. Without my software, Liam had absolutely no access to the current quarterly data. He could not track their active campaigns. He could not measure their return on investment. He was walking into a high-stakes meeting with a notoriously demanding client, armed with nothing but empty corporate buzzwords and his unearned confidence. I spent my Wednesday finalizing the onboarding documents for my new hires. I did not feel a single ounce of guilt. For years I had set myself on fire to keep them warm. I had absorbed their insults, swallowed my pride, and accepted their breadcrumbs while serving them a feast. My mother had the audacity to tell me I would never survive without their handouts. She had looked at my brilliant mind and seen only a tool to be used and discarded. They had made their choices. They had chosen to elevate a completely incompetent man over their own blood because he fit the aesthetic they desired. Now they would have to suffer the consequences of that choice. I went to sleep on Wednesday night feeling perfectly serene. The air in my apartment was cool and quiet. My phone remained on silent, its screen dark and undisturbed. I knew the silence would not last much longer. The foundation of their company was already collapsing under the weight of their arrogance, and the shockwaves were bound to reach me soon. I closed my eyes, resting up for the inevitable collision. The radio silence had served its purpose. It had given me the clarity and the strength to fortify my defenses. I was no longer the undervalued daughter desperate for a seat at their table. I was the architect of my own destiny, and I was ready for whatever came next. Thursday morning arrived with the kind of crisp, bright sunlight that felt like a personal reward. I stretched, enjoying the rare sensation of waking up without a heavy knot of anxiety sitting in the pit of my stomach. I walked into my kitchen, poured a fresh cup of dark roast coffee, and finally picked up my personal phone from the counter. I had kept it on a strict do not disturb mode since Monday, refusing to let their toxic energy penetrate my sanctuary. I tapped the screen and it instantly lit up like a slot machine hitting the jackpot. The notifications flooded the display in a rapid, endless stream. 112 missed calls, 47 from Kiara, 40 from my mother Denise, 25 from Liam. There were also 84 text messages stacked in my blocked folder. The sheer volume of their desperation was a physical testament to the collapse I knew was happening. I took a slow sip of my coffee, leaned against the granite counter, and decided to listen to the voicemails. I wanted to hear the exact progression of their arrogance turning into absolute terror. The first voicemail was time-stamped Wednesday at 2:15 in the afternoon. It was exactly 15 minutes after Liam's quarterly strategy presentation with Vanguard Lifestyle was scheduled to begin. Maya, pick up the phone right now, Kiara's voice snapped through the speaker. Her tone was sharp, filled with that familiar entitled irritation. Liam is in the boardroom with the Vanguard executives, and he cannot access the client portal. The interface is completely frozen, and your administrative login is not working. Stop playing games and text me the password immediately. You are being incredibly unprofessional. I smiled. She still thought I was throwing a tantrum. She still believed she was in control. The second voicemail came in at 2:45. This time it was Liam. The smug, condescending drawl he always used when speaking to me was completely gone. Instead, his voice was tight-strained and breathless. Maya, listen to me, he panted, sounding like he had just sprinted down a hallway to call me in private. This is not funny anymore. Cynthia from Vanguard is asking for the real-time consumer conversion metrics, and the entire back-end system is locked out. The cloud server says the host has revoked access. I need you to grant me permission right now. I will forget this whole stunt ever happened if you just fix the dashboard. Call me back immediately. I closed my eyes, picturing the scene perfectly. Cynthia, the chief marketing officer at Vanguard Lifestyle, was a brilliant, no-nonsense black woman who had built her brand from the ground up. She did not tolerate corporate fluff, and she certainly did not tolerate incompetence. I knew exactly how that meeting was going down. For the past 2 years, I was the one sitting in the back of the room during those presentations. I would have my laptop open, pulling granular demographic data and live engagement statistics, while Liam stood at the front of the room, pointing at my slides. Whenever a client asked a difficult analytical question, Liam would conveniently pivot and say he wanted to let his senior account director speak to the technical details. I would save him. I would provide the hard data, secure the client confidence, and ensure the retainer was renewed. Then Liam would take them out for drinks and claim the victory. Without me sitting in the back of that room, Liam had absolutely no safety net. He was standing in front of Cynthia trying to use meaningless buzzwords like synergy and market disruption to explain a $2.5 million marketing budget. And Cynthia was tearing him apart. I pressed play on the third voicemail. It was time-stamped Wednesday at 4:30 in the afternoon. Maya, this is your mother. Denise's voice was shaking with a mixture of fury and rising panic. I do not know what you have done, but you need to fix it. Liam is in my office, sweating through his suit. Vanguard walked out of the meeting. They demanded to know where you were, and Kiara had to admit you resigned. They are threatening to pull the contract, Maya. Do you understand what that means? You are destroying your father's legacy. You get in your car and you come down here right now. My father's legacy. The phrase made my blood boil. My father had built a small, respectable public relations firm based on community trust and hard work. When he passed away, Denise and Kiara turned it into a vanity project. They cared more about networking at exclusive country clubs and maintaining their status in the Atlanta high society circles than they did about actual public relations. They had handed the keys to Liam simply because he looked the part of a corporate executive, completely ignoring the fact that he was driving the company straight into a brick wall. I took another sip of coffee and played the final voicemail. It was from Kiara, sent late Wednesday night. The facade of the authoritative chief executive officer was completely shattered. She was crying, real heavy, desperate tears. Maya, please, she sobbed, her voice cracking. Please pick up the phone. They pulled the retainer. Cynthia sent the termination notice an hour ago. $2.5 million, Maya. That was 40% of our operating budget. We cannot make payroll next month without that account. Liam is completely losing his mind. Please, Maya, I am begging you. You have to come back and fix your mess. Name your price. We will give you the vice president title. We will double your salary. Just call me back. I set my phone down on the counter. The silence in my apartment felt richer, heavier, and more satisfying than any apology they could ever offer. Fix my mess. Even in her absolute desperation, Kiara still tried to place the blame on me. It was not her mess for elevating an unqualified man. It was not Liam mess for failing to understand the basic functions of the business he was supposed to lead. It was my mess because I had finally refused to carry their dead weight. I felt a profound sense of vindication washing over me. For years they had gaslit me into believing I was the problem. Denise had constantly criticized my direct communication style, telling me I lacked the grace required for executive leadership. Kiara had treated me like a glorified assistant, taking credit for the sleepless nights I spent coding the very software that kept their doors open. They had convinced themselves that my brilliance was actually their property. They thought I would fail in the corporate world without their name backing me. They thought I was completely dependent on their handouts. But the truth was undeniably clear now. I was the only thing holding their fragile glass house together. And the moment I stepped outside, it shattered into a million irreparable pieces. I did not feel a single ounce of guilt. I walked back into my home office and opened my laptop. Aura Analytics was thriving. The $4 million federal contract we had secured on Tuesday required my full attention. I had a team of 20 brilliant individuals who respected my leadership and valued my vision. I was not going to waste a single second of my morning negotiating with a sinking ship. I opened my email to find a direct message from Cynthia, the Chief Marketing Officer at Vanguard Lifestyle. I had reached out to her from my personal email address the moment I resigned on Friday, simply thanking her for her partnership over the past 2 years. Her message to me was brief but incredibly validating. Maya, it was a pleasure working with you. It became glaringly obvious yesterday that you were the true architect of our campaign success. Anderson Public Relations no longer meets our standard of excellence. Let me know where you land next. We want our business wherever you are. I smiled, typing out a quick professional reply. I informed her that I was actually the founder and chief executive officer of Aura Analytics, an independent digital strategy firm. I attached a link to our secure portfolio and offered to set up a private consultation to discuss transitioning her account to an agency that actually understood her data needs. I hit send knowing that Vanguard Lifestyle would be officially signing with Aura Analytics before the end of the week. I was not just walking away from my family firm. I was actively absorbing their market share. Just as I closed my phone vibrated on the desk. A new text message had bypassed my blocked folder because it came from an unknown number. I opened it cautiously. Maya, it is Mom. I am using a burner phone because you blocked me. I know you are in your apartment. I am driving over right now. You are going to open your door and we are going to handle this as a family. I stared at the glowing screen, my heart rate remaining perfectly steady. Denise was coming to my sanctuary. She was leaving her corner office in Buckhead to drive across town and confront me in person. She was probably expecting to bully me into submission, expecting me to cower under her maternal authority the way I always had when I was younger. But I was not that girl anymore. I was a 33-year-old chief executive officer who held their entire financial future in the palm of my hand. I set my phone face down on the desk, smoothed the fabric of my silk lounge set, and walked toward the front door to wait. The radio silence had officially ended. The real confrontation was about to begin. When my own sister looked me dead in the eye and handed the promotion I had bled for to her grossly incompetent husband, she expected me to break down. She expected me to beg for my place at the table. Instead, I simply smiled, slid my corporate keycard across the mahogany desk, and walked out without a backward glance. 4 days later, my phone screen lit up with 100 missed calls as their entire empire began to burn to the ground. My name is Chloe. I am 33 years old, and for the past 8 years, I have been the invisible backbone of our family public relations firm in Atlanta. We were sitting in the glass-walled executive boardroom on the 30th floor of our downtown office. The Friday morning sunlight was streaming through the floor-to-ceiling windows, casting long shadows across the polished mahogany table. I had my tablet open in front of me, displaying the quarterly revenue reports. The numbers were undeniable. My division, the digital strategy and analytics sector, had brought in 80% of the firm's new revenue this year. I had personally secured our top 3 accounts, including the massive Vanguard Lifestyle brand. I had worked 80-hour weeks, missed holidays, and sacrificed my personal life to ensure those clients stayed happy. My older sister, Jasmine, sat at the head of the table. At 36, she was the pristine image of corporate perfection, wearing a tailored white suit, her hair pulled back into a flawless silk press. Jasmine was the chief executive officer, a title she inherited directly from our mother, Beatrice, who sat to her right. Our mother was a woman who valued social standing and country club optics above all else. She had always made it clear that Jasmine was the golden child, the daughter who did everything right, who married the exact type of man our mother approved of, and who maintained the perfect image for the Atlanta high society circles she cared so much about. I was the workhorse, the daughter who stayed late in the trenches, pulling the late nights, fixing the crisis campaigns, and making sure the company did not sink. Sitting across from me was Trevor, my sister's husband. Trevor was a 38-year-old white man who had bounced around 3 different mid-level finance jobs before Jasmine convinced Beatrice to bring him into the family firm last year. He wore expensive suits and used corporate buzzwords like synergy and paradigm shift, but he could not read a basic analytics dashboard if his life depended on it. He spent his days taking 2-hour lunches and playing golf with potential clients who never seemed to actually sign with us. Whenever a project required actual heavy lifting, he would conveniently delegate the work to my team and then stand at the front of the room during the client presentation to take all the credit. I shifted in my leather chair, feeling a sense of quiet anticipation. Today was the day they were supposed to announce the new vice president of strategy. I had earned this. I had built the entire strategy department from scratch. Beatrice tapped her gold pen against the table, signaling that the meeting was beginning. Jasmine stood up, projecting that practiced authoritative voice she used when she wanted to sound like a visionary. "We have seen tremendous growth this quarter," she began, her eyes sweeping over the room but never quite landing on me. "But to take our firm to the next level, we need strong dynamic leadership at the executive level. We need someone who can represent the face of this company to our elite clients." I closed my tablet, giving her my full attention, waiting to hear my name. "Therefore," Jasmine continued, a tight smile forming on her lips, "I am proud to announce that our new vice president of strategy will be Trevor." The air left my lungs. The room went completely silent save for the hum of the air conditioning. I stared at my sister, waiting for the punchline, but her face was perfectly serious. Beatrice was beaming, clapping her hands together with genuine delight. Trevor leaned back in his chair, adjusting his expensive tie with a smug look of satisfaction that made my stomach turn. "Trevor," I asked, keeping my voice perfectly level, "you are giving the strategy division to Trevor. He has never run a single campaign. He does not even know how to access the client portal." Beatrice sighed loudly, a sound she reserved specifically for my perceived shortcomings. "Chloe, please do not be difficult. Your sister is making a business decision, not a personal one. You should be congratulating your brother-in-law." "It is entirely a business decision," Jasmine said, folding her hands on the table. "Chloe, you are great at the back-end stuff. You are a brilliant worker bee. But the vice president role requires a certain executive polish. It requires a vision and a presence that, frankly, you just do not possess. You are too blunt with the clients. You do not fit the image we are trying to project for the firm future." I sat there absorbing her words. Executive polish. It was the same coded language my mother had used my entire life to tell me I was too dark, too outspoken, too natural to be the face of their pristine brand. They wanted my labor. They wanted the millions of dollars my campaigns brought in, but they did not want me sitting at the head of the table. They wanted to keep me hidden in the background while Trevor paraded around as the face of my success. Trevor slid a crisp sheet of paper across the mahogany table toward me. It was the new organizational chart. I looked down at the boxes and lines. At the top was Jasmine as Chief Executive Officer. Right below her was Trevor as Vice President of Strategy, and branching down from him a small box with my name, Senior Account Director. "I know this is an adjustment," Chloe, Trevor said, using that condescending tone of a man who had been handed everything he ever wanted. "But I really need you to be a team player here. We have some big goals for the next quarter, and I am going to need you to bring me up to speed on the Vanguard account by Monday. I will be taking over as their primary point of contact. He wanted to take my biggest client, the client I had spent 2 years cultivating, and claim the relationship for himself to justify his new title. He wanted me to hand over the keys to the castle so he could lock me in the basement and take the credit for the gold I had mined. Beatrice leaned forward, resting her elbows on the table. We are a family, Chloe. We support each other. Trevor is going to take this company to new heights, and you are going to help him do it. It is time to put your pride aside and do what is best for our legacy. For a moment, I just looked at the three of them. My mother, who saw me only as a tool to elevate her favorite daughter. My sister, who was willing to sacrifice the integrity of her business to stroke her husband's ego. And Trevor, the mediocre man who felt completely entitled to steal my crown. Years ago, this betrayal would have broken me. I would have argued, cried, defended my worth, and begged them to see my value. But sitting there in that cold glass boardroom, I realized something incredibly powerful. You cannot prove your worth to people who benefit from keeping you beneath them. And more importantly, they had absolutely no idea who they were talking to. They did not know that for the past 4 years, while they were attending gala dinners and taking long weekend vacations, I had been working until 3 in the morning building my own company. They did not know that Aura Digital, my independent marketing tech firm, was quietly dominating the industry and generating millions. They did not know that the proprietary software they relied on to service their clients actually belonged to me. I had built it, I owned the licenses, and I had been letting them use it out of a misplaced sense of family loyalty. They thought they had trapped me. They thought I needed this job, this title, their approval. I looked down at the organizational chart Trevor had given me. I calmly folded it in half, and then in half again, placing it neatly beside my water glass. I am not going to be a team player, Trevor, I said softly. Jasmine frowned, her authoritative facade slipping slightly. Chloe, do not throw a tantrum. You are still making a very good salary. You should be grateful you even have a seat in this room. I am not throwing a tantrum, Jasmine, I replied. My voice was steady, completely empty of the anger they expected to see. In fact, I have never felt more clear-headed in my entire life. I closed my tablet. I unplugged my laptop, wrapping the cord with deliberate, slow movements. The silence in the room shifted from triumphant to confused. Beatrice watched me with narrowed eyes. What are you doing, Chloe? She demanded, her voice sharp. Sit back down. We are not finished discussing the transition. Yes, we are, I said, standing up from the leather chair. I picked up my laptop bag and slung it over my shoulder. I reached into my blazer pocket, pulled out my heavy plastic corporate keycard, and placed it flat on the center of the mahogany table. I slid it forward. It glided across the smooth wood, coming to a stop right in front of Trevor's folded hands. I resign, I said, looking directly into Jasmine's shocked eyes. Effective immediately. Trevor let out a nervous laugh. You cannot just quit. You have the Vanguard presentation next week. You have client deliverables. You are the vice president of strategy now. Trevor, I smiled, a genuine warm smile that clearly unnerved him. I am sure you have the executive polish to figure it out. You are making a huge mistake, Chloe. Beatrice warned, her voice rising in panic and anger. If you walk out that door, do not expect to come crawling back when you run out of money. We will not bail you out. I do not need your bailouts, Mom. I never did. I turned my back on them and walked toward the glass doors. I could hear Jasmine demanding that I stop, telling me I was acting unprofessionally, that I was burning bridges. I pushed the heavy glass door open, stepping out of the boardroom and into the quiet hallway. I did not look back. I walked straight to the elevator, pressed the lobby button, and waited. When the elevator doors closed, sealing me off from their voices, a massive weight lifted off my chest. I walked out of the building into the warm Atlanta morning air. I got into my car, gripped the steering wheel, and let out a long, deep breath. I had just walked away from my family-toxic structure, but I was not scared. I started the engine, pulled out of the parking garage, and drove home in complete silence. They thought they had won, but they had just signed their own death warrant. The countdown had officially begun. The heavy wooden door clicked shut, and I slid the brass deadbolt into place. I stood in my ear, listening to the muffled sounds of Beatrice, my own mother, huffing in indignation on the other side of the door. She knocked twice more, her knuckles rapping sharply against the wood, demanding that I open the door and show some respect. I did not move. I did not speak. I just listened, as her expensive heels finally clicked away down the tiled hallway of my apartment building. When the silence returned, it felt permanent. I had just drawn a line in the sand that could never be uncrossed. Beatrice had come to my home expecting to find a broken daughter. She expected to find me crying on my couch, desperate for her validation, and willing to crawl back to the family firm just to earn her approval. She thought her threats of cutting me out of the family would terrify me into submission. But she was wrong. The moment I closed that door in her face, I completely severed the emotional strings she had used to control me my entire life. I walked back to my home office, sat down in my ergonomic chair, and went right back to building my empire. But my sister Kiara was a different story. Kiara did not handle rejection well. Her entire identity was wrapped up in being the powerful, untouchable chief executive officer. She was used to snapping her fingers and having everyone around her fall into line. When Beatrice returned to the office and reported that I had refused to come back to save Liam and his failing strategy division, Kiara absolutely lost her mind. She realized that I was not throwing a tantrum. She realized that the Vanguard lifestyle account was truly gone, and that she had no way to replace the $2.5 million I had taken with me. Desperation makes people dangerous, but it also makes them incredibly stupid. Since Kiara could not bully me into coming back, she decided she was going to destroy me, so I made sure I was completely unemployable in the city of Atlanta. She thought that if she ruined my professional reputation, I would eventually be forced to return to the family firm and beg for the demotion she had offered me. It started on a Tuesday morning. I was sitting at my kitchen island, drinking a cup of green tea and reviewing a new data integration model for Aura Analytics, when my personal cell phone began to vibrate. It was a call from Sydney. Sydney was a senior media buyer at one of the largest advertising agencies in the Southeast. We had worked together on dozens of high-profile campaigns over the years. We were not exactly close friends, but we had a deep mutual respect for each other's work ethic. I answered the call expecting her to ask a question about a vendor contact. Instead, her voice came through the speaker, sounding tense and hushed. "Chloe," she said quickly, "I am forwarding you an email right now to your personal address. You need to open it immediately." I frowned, setting my tea mug down on the granite counter. "What is it, Sydney? What is going on?" "It is from your sister," she replied, her tone filled with disbelief. "Kiara just sent a mass email to a private mailing list. It went out to about 50 top-tier marketing executives, event planners, and media buyers in the Atlanta circuit. Chloe, she is saying some really crazy things about you. I thought you should know because people are definitely talking." I thanked Sydney, hung up the phone, and opened my email inbox. The message was sitting right there, forwarded with high importance. The subject line read, "Confidential update regarding Anderson Public Relations Leadership Transition." I clicked open the email and read the words my own sister had typed. Kiara had framed the message as a professional courtesy to her industry partners, claiming she wanted to be transparent about the recent sudden changes in her executive team. But the body of the email was nothing short of a character assassination. Kiara wrote that I had not resigned from the firm. She claimed that I had been forcefully terminated by the executive board due to a severe and ongoing pattern of emotional instability. She stated that my erratic behavior had become a liability to the company culture and that they had been forced to let me go to protect their client relationships. But she did not stop there. The next paragraph made my blood run ice cold. Kiara wrote that the firm was currently conducting an internal financial audit regarding my division. She strongly insinuated that there were discrepancies in the billing logs and that I was being investigated for the embezzlement of client funds. She warned the recipients of the email to exercise extreme caution if they were considering hiring me or working with me in the future. She was accusing me of a felony. She was putting it in writing and broadcasting it to the most powerful people in my industry. For a fraction of a second, the little girl inside me, the one who just wanted her sister to love her, felt a sharp, stabbing pain in her chest. My own flesh and blood was actively trying to destroy my life. She was willing to ruin my future, risk my freedom, and shatter my reputation just to cover up the fact that she had promoted her incompetent husband. But that moment of pain vanished as quickly as it arrived. It was instantly replaced by a wave of cold, calculating clarity. I did not panic. I did not cry. I did not pick up the phone to scream at her. I simply smiled. Kiara had always been arrogant, but I never realized she was this reckless. In her desperate attempt to control the narrative and punish me for leaving, she had just handed me a loaded gun. Over the next 2 hours, my inbox was flooded with forwarded copies of the exact same email. My industry contacts were sending it to me one by one. The Atlanta public relations circuit is a very small, very tight-knit community. We all know each other. And more importantly, they all knew me. They knew that I was the one pulling the late nights. They knew that I was the one who actually answered their frantic emails at 3 in the morning when a campaign went off the rails. They knew my work ethic was flawless. Kiara thought her title as Chief Executive Officer gave her credibility. She forgot that credibility is built on trust and labor, not on designer suits and country club memberships. Her smear campaign was backfiring spectacularly. Instead of turning the industry against me, her email was exposing her own desperation. People were forwarding the message to me because they knew she was lying, and they wanted to make sure I was protected. I calmly downloaded every single forwarded email. I captured the timestamps, the recipient lists, and the exact wording of her defamatory claims. I organized everything into a secure digital folder. Then I picked up my phone and called Jackson. Jackson was the lead corporate attorney I had retained for Aura Analytics. He was a brilliant, meticulous legal mind who specialized in corporate litigation and contract law. When he answered the phone, I skipped the small talk and got straight to the point. "Jackson," I said, leaning back in my office chair, "check your secure email portal. I just sent you a file. I need you to review it immediately." I listened to the sound of his fingers tapping against his keyboard on the other end of the line. There was a brief silence as he read through Kiara Mass' email. Then I heard him let out a low whistle of absolute disbelief. "Chloe," he said, his voice laced with professional shock. "Did your sister actually send this from her official corporate email account?" "She did," I replied, pouring myself another cup of coffee. "She sent it to at least 50 major industry executives." Jackson laughed, a dry, humorless sound. "This is defamation per se. She has made false claims about your professional competence, and she has accused you of criminal financial misconduct in writing. This is not just a lawsuit, Chloe. This is a corporate execution. I can have a cease and desist letter drafted and sent to their legal department within the hour. We can force a public retraction and sue them for astronomical damages." I looked out my window, watching the city traffic moving far below. I thought about the panic that must be gripping the Anderson Public Relations office right now. I thought about Liam trying to figure out how to do my job and failing miserably. I thought about Beatrice demanding that I fix their problems. "No," I said, my voice perfectly calm. "Do not send a cease and desist. Do not contact them at all." Jackson paused, clearly confused. "Chloe, she is actively trying to destroy your reputation. If we do not stop her." "If we stop her now, she will only face a minor penalty," I interrupted. "I know my sister. If we send a legal threat today, she will panic, claim her email was hacked, and try to sweep it under the rug. She will hire a crisis team to minimize the damage." "I do not want to minimize the damage, Jackson. I want her to dig the hole as deep as possible." I explained my strategy to him. Right now, Kiara felt powerful because she thought her email was working. I wanted her to feel invincible. I wanted her to keep talking, keep forwarding that email, and keep expanding the list of recipients. Every single time she hit the send button, she was increasing the financial damages she would eventually have to pay me. Every lie she told was just adding another zero to my eventual payout. If you interrupt your enemy while they are making a mistake, you lose your advantage. Kiara was handing me the nails for her own coffin, and I was going to let her keep hammering until she was completely trapped. "Keep the file safe, Jackson," I instructed. "Build the defamation case and have the lawsuit ready to file. But we keep it in our back pocket for now. We are going to let them bleed out a little longer." Jackson agreed, praising the tactical patience of the plan. I ended the call and closed my laptop, feeling a deep, profound sense of power. Kiara thought she was on the offensive. She thought she was running a brilliant smear campaign that would force me to surrender. She had no idea that she was just a mouse running through a maze I had already designed. My reputation was completely insulated by the silent fortress of Aura Analytics. While she was wasting her energy typing out desperate lies to cover up her husband failures, I was busy securing million-dollar government contracts. I spent the rest of my day conducting video interviews for my new data science team. I was happy, focused, and entirely unbothered by the toxic noise my family was trying to generate. They were thrashing violently like drowning swimmers while I was standing safely on the deck of a massive ship entirely of my own making. The smear campaign was not a threat to my future. It was just the final piece of evidence I needed to justify taking absolutely everything they had left. By Friday morning, the dust from Kiara's desperate smear campaign had completely settled and the real business began. I was sitting in my corner office at Aura Analytics, watching the Atlanta skyline wake up. My assistant buzzed my intercom to let me know that Cynthia, the chief marketing officer for Vanguard Lifestyle, had arrived in the lobby. I walked out to greet her myself. Cynthia was a powerhouse, an African-American woman who commanded respect the moment she stepped off an elevator. When I led her into my office, she bypassed the small talk entirely. She sat down in the leather guest chair, crossed her legs, and handed me a thick folder containing the formal transition documents. Cynthia told me that the final meeting with Liam had been an absolute train wreck. She described how Liam had tried to present a printed slideshow full of stock images and generic marketing jargon. When she asked for the specific conversion metrics for their upcoming winter launch, he actually tried to blame a software glitch. She knew instantly that he was lying. She knew that the real intelligence behind her account had walked out the door the previous week. I slid the transition contracts across my desk and signed them one by one. With those signatures, Vanguard Lifestyle officially became an Aura Analytics client. I had just secured a $2.5 million retainer and effectively severed the main artery of my family public relations firm. But I was not finished. The Atlanta corporate network is an ecosystem built on whispers and results. When a giant like Vanguard Lifestyle moves their entire portfolio overnight, people notice. They talk at networking luncheons, they gossip in boardroom lobbies, and they pay very close attention to where the smart money is flowing. By Monday afternoon, my secure intake portal flagged two new massive inquiries. The first was from Horizon Tech, a regional software developer that had been with the family firm for 3 years. The second was from Sterling Hospitality, a luxury hotel group that my father had personally brought into the company a decade ago. I set up virtual consultations with both of their executive boards. The stories they told me mirrored Cynthia's experience almost exactly. Kiara had tried to smooth over my sudden absence by claiming the firm was restructuring for better efficiency. She had sent Liam to manage their accounts, and within 48 hours he had managed to insult the Horizon Tech developers and completely fumble a press release for Sterling Hospitality. They were fleeing. They were dissatisfied, furious, and looking for a lifeboat. I did not have to poach them. I did not have to play dirty or spread rumors the way my sister did. I simply opened the door and let them walk into a superior agency. I brought Jamal and Gabrielle into my office and we mapped out the integration strategy. We legally acquired the Horizon Tech and Sterling Hospitality contracts by Wednesday morning. In the span of exactly 5 business days, Aura Analytics had absorbed over 60% of the revenue that previously belonged to my family firm. I stood by my window looking out at the city, feeling a profound sense of justice. For years, my mother Denise had told me I was riding her coattails. She told me I lacked the grace to survive in her elite circles. Kiara had convinced herself that her chief executive officer title was the only thing keeping clients on their roster. They had built their entire identity around the illusion of their own superiority. But numbers do not care about country club memberships. Data does not care about designer suits. While we were expanding our server capacity and celebrating our newest acquisitions, a very different scene was unfolding on the 30th floor of the family building. I did not need spies to know exactly what was happening over there. I knew their financial infrastructure intimately because I was the one who used to try and balance their reckless spending against our actual revenue. The family firm was bleeding out fast. Their cash flow was completely frozen. Denise and Kiara ran that company like a personal piggy bank. They leased the most expensive commercial real estate in downtown Atlanta just for the prestige. They paid astronomical monthly fees for luxury company cars, private club access, and high-end catered lunches. They operated on razor-thin margins, assuming the retainer checks from Vanguard Horizon and Sterling would always clear on the first of the month. Now those checks were gone. Without that capital, they could not cover the overhead. I knew the exact date their commercial lease payment was due, and I knew they did not have the liquid assets to cover it. The panic must have been suffocating. I could picture Liam sitting in his new corner office staring at a negative bank balance. The sheer terror of realizing he had convinced his wife to hand him the wheel of a car right as it went off a cliff. He had wanted the vice president title so desperately. He had wanted the six-figure salary and the corner office, but he had absolutely no idea how to generate revenue. He was a parasite who had just killed his only host, and Kiara, my sister, the golden child who had spent her entire life looking down on me. She was now sitting at the helm of a sinking ship, holding a bucket full of holes. She had tried to destroy my reputation with a smear campaign, and it had done absolutely nothing to stop her impending bankruptcy. Her emails full of lies and defamation could not pay her staff. They could not pay her vendors. They could not save her from the reality of her own incompetence. The desperation began to leak into the industry gossip. My media contacts started reaching out asking if I knew what was happening at the family firm. They told me that vendors were complaining about unpaid invoices. They said Kiara was frantically trying to pitch new clients offering massive discounts just to get some cash through the door, but nobody was biting. The smell of a dying company is distinct, and investors avoid it like the plague. Denise must have been losing her mind. Her entire social standing was tied to the success of that firm. If the company went under, she would lose the elite status she prized above her own children. She had threatened to cut me off to leave me with nothing if I did not fall into line. Now she was watching everything she valued turn to dust, and there was absolutely nothing she could do to stop it. I spent my Friday afternoon reviewing the quarterly projections for Aura Analytics. We were on track to double our revenue by the end of the year. My team was motivated, well compensated, and deeply respected. I had created the exact environment I had always craved, an environment where hard work and brilliance were rewarded, where credit was given where it was due. I did not feel sorry for my family. I did not feel a sudden urge to swoop in and rescue them. They had dug this grave with their own hands using tools forged from arrogance and entitlement. I was simply the one who had finally stopped filling the hole for them. As the week came to a close, the inevitable happened. The absolute total freezing of their assets forced them into a corner they could not talk their way out of. They were drowning in debt and the water was rising fast. I closed my laptop for the weekend, knowing that the next phase of their collapse was going to be the most desperate and satisfying part of this entire journey. They had nowhere left to run, and the walls were closing in tight. Monday morning brought a torrential downpour to the city of Atlanta, washing the streets clean and matching the cold, relentless efficiency I felt settling into my bones. I arrived at my office at Aura Analytics by 7, taking my usual spot behind my desk, overlooking the gray skyline. The weekend had given my family exactly 48 hours to sit in the suffocating reality of their frozen cash flow. I knew the silence in their corporate suite was deafening. I was reviewing the onboarding schedule for the Vanguard Lifestyle Marketing team when my head of operations, Gabrielle, knocked firmly on my glass door. She walked in holding her tablet with an expression that was an equal mix of absolute disbelief and predatory amusement. "You are going to want to read this immediately," Gabrielle said, sliding her tablet across the smooth surface of my desk. "We just received an emergency inquiry through the corporate acquisitions portal." I looked down at the screen. The email was sent at 6 in the morning. The sender was Liam. I leaned forward, resting my elbows on the desk as I read the message. It was addressed to the Aura Analytics Executive Board. Liam had clearly spent his entire weekend crafting a desperate plea disguised as a confident corporate proposal. He wrote that Anderson Public Relations was currently exploring strategic partnerships to expand their digital footprint. He claimed that after reviewing our recent market acquisitions, he believed a merger of their legacy brand with our technological infrastructure would create an unstoppable synergy in the Southeast region. He ended the email by stating that due to a highly confidential restructuring phase, they were prepared to offer a controlling stake in their firm and requested an expedited meeting to discuss acquisition terms. I read the email a second time, letting out a sharp, humorless laugh. A strategic partnership, a confidential restructuring phase. It was a masterclass in corporate delusion. Liam was standing in the ashes of a burning building trying to sell me the smoke. "Hi is begging," Gabrielle noted, taking a seat across from me. I pulled the preliminary financial disclosure he attached. It is a complete work of fiction. I opened the attached spreadsheet and felt a surge of professional disgust. Liam had attempted to massage the numbers, but he was fundamentally unqualified to hide the massive bleeding wounds in their cash flow. He had listed their projected quarterly revenue based on retainers they no longer possessed. He had completely omitted the $2.5 million gap left by Vanguard Lifestyle. He had inflated the value of their physical assets and buried their mounting vendor liabilities under vague categories like operational consulting. "They are out of money," I told Gabrielle, tracing the fraudulent numbers on the screen. "Their commercial lease on that 30th floor office was due on Friday. They run a net 30 billing cycle with their contractors, and those invoices are bouncing. Kiara and Liam do not have the personal liquid assets to cover a gap this massive. Which means Denise is footing the bill," Gabrielle concluded. "Exactly," I nodded. My mother Denise valued her social standing more than oxygen. She would never allow the family business to publicly default, because it would mean admitting failure to her country club circle. She had likely leveraged the equity on her Buckhead mansion just to make payroll this week. But leveraging personal property for a failing business was a temporary band-aid on a fatal wound. They needed a massive cash injection, and they needed it before the end of the month. They had watched Aura Analytics swoop in and absorb their three biggest clients in a matter of days. To Liam and Kiara, my company was a faceless tech giant with deep pockets. They thought they could walk into a boardroom, dazzle a group of anonymous venture capitalists with their family name, and walk away with a golden parachute that would save them from bankruptcy. They had absolutely no idea that the predator circling their sinking ship was the exact same woman they had driven out the door. "Call Jackson," I instructed Gabrielle, referencing my lead corporate attorney. "Get him in here right now. We are going to set the trap." Jackson arrived 20 minutes later holding a fresh cup of coffee and a legal notepad. I projected Liam's email and the fraudulent financial statements onto the large monitor on my office wall. Jackson took one look at the numbers and shook his head in pure legal horror. "This is wire fraud waiting to happen," Jackson stated bluntly. "He is submitting falsified financial projections across state lines in an attempt to secure a corporate buyout. If we acquire them based on these numbers, and then discover the hidden debt, your brother-in-law will be facing federal charges." "Hi is a desperate man grasping at straws," I replied, pacing in front of the screen. "He knows the ship is going down, and he is trying to trick us into buying the anchor. I want to engage him, Jackson. I want to offer them exactly what they are asking for. An emergency acquisition meeting." Jackson smiled, his eyes gleaming with the tactical precision that made him the best corporate litigator in the city. "How do you want to play the correspondence?" "Keep me completely invisible," I instructed. "Have all communications come directly from your desk under the title of Chief Legal Counsel for Aura Analytics. Tell him our executive board has reviewed his proposal and is highly interested in acquiring their remaining market share. Tell him we are prepared to fast-track the negotiations due to the aggressive expansion of our firm." Gabrielle took notes rapidly, preparing the internal calendar. "When do you want them in the building?" she asked. "Friday morning at 10, I said. "Let them sweat through the entire week. Let them deal with the angry vendors, the disconnected phone lines, and the bouncing checks. By the time Friday arrives, they will be so desperate for a lifeline they will sign anything we put in front of them." Jackson drafted the response email right there in my office. He used the perfect blend of clinical corporate language and tantalizing urgency. He offered a physical meeting at our downtown high-rise headquarters, stipulating that all primary shareholders must be present to authorize the transition of assets. That meant Liam, Kiara, and Denise all had to be in the room. We hit send at 9:30 in the morning. I did not have to wait long for the desperation to show its face. Exactly 12 minutes later, Jackson's secure inbox chimed with a reply. Liam had agreed to all terms. He confirmed that the chief executive officer Kiara and the founder Denise would accompany him to the meeting. He even thanked Jackson for recognizing the historic value of the Anderson public relations brand. He took the bait, I said, staring at the confirmation email. He swallowed it whole. Now comes the fun part, Jackson said, pulling up a blank legal template on his laptop. We need to draft the actual acquisition documents. What are our terms? My terms were going to be absolutely brutal. I was not going to buy their company. I was not going to absorb their liabilities, pay their outstanding leases, or take on the vendor debt Liam had recklessly accumulated. I was going to construct an asset purchase agreement that would strip them of everything valuable and leave them holding the bag for their own failures. Draft an agreement to purchase their remaining intellectual property client databases and physical office assets, I instructed. We are not acquiring the Anderson entity itself. We are simply buying their tools for pennies on the dollar. Offer them exactly enough cash to cover the immediate personal debts Liam has likely hidden from my mother. Do not offer a single cent more. Jackson's fingers flew across the keyboard, translating my strategy into airtight legal parameters. You realize this offer will leave them with absolutely nothing, right? The cash will immediately evaporate to cover their liabilities. The firm will have to be dissolved. I know, I said, my voice steady and cold. They wanted to strip me of my title, my clients, and my dignity. I am simply returning the favor. For the remainder of the week, I compartmentalized the impending confrontation with complete emotional detachment. I focused my energy on the people who actually deserved my time. I finalized the integration of the Vanguard Lifestyle account, conducting a seamless onboarding process with Cynthia and her marketing team. They were thrilled with the predictive modeling software I provided, entirely validating my decision to walk away from my family outdated methods. As Friday approached, the atmosphere in my office shifted into a state of hyper-focused preparation. I arranged the main boardroom on the executive floor with meticulous intention. I instructed building security to grant Liam, Kiara, and Denise immediate access to the private elevators upon their arrival. I wanted them to experience the sheer scale of the empire I had built. I wanted them to walk past the glass-walled developer bays, the buzzing data centers, and the sleek modern architecture that made their stuffy antique office look like a relic of the past. Thursday evening, I stayed late at the office, finalizing the asset purchase agreements with Jackson. The legal binders were thick, heavy, and absolute. Once those signatures were on the dotted lines, there would be no turning back. Anderson Public Relations would cease to exist as a functional entity, and the toxic hold my family had over my professional life would be legally and permanently eradicated. I stood in the center of the empty boardroom, running my hand along the edge of the polished granite table. Tomorrow morning, the three people who had spent my entire life trying to shrink me to fit their comfort zone would walk through those double glass doors. They would walk in expecting to find a group of white male venture capitalists ready to save them. They would walk in expecting to use their social status as leverage. Instead, they were going to find me. I turned off the boardroom lights and walked out into the quiet hallway. I was not the undervalued workhorse anymore. I was the executioner, and the blade was perfectly sharp. Friday morning arrived with a brilliant, blinding sunlight that reflected off the glass skyscrapers of downtown Atlanta. I stood in my executive suite on the 40th floor of the Aura Analytics building, looking out over the city. Today was the day the illusion finally shattered. I was wearing a tailored crimson suit that fit me perfectly. The color was deliberate. For 8 years I had worn muted tones, neutral colors, and invisible shades to blend into the background of my family public relations firm. I dressed to make my mother Denise and my sister Kiara comfortable. Today I was dressing for myself. I was the executioner, and I wanted them to see me coming. At 9:30 in the morning, my head of operations, Gabrielle, walked into my office, followed closely by my lead corporate attorney, Jackson. They both looked sharp-focused and completely ready for the corporate demolition we had planned. Gabrielle handed me a cup of dark roast coffee and set a tablet down on the center of my desk. The screen displayed the live high-definition security feed from our ground floor lobby. "We have eyes on the perimeter," Gabrielle said, a highly satisfied smile playing on her lips. They just pulled up to the valet stand. I looked down at the tablet and watched the live video feed. My family had arrived in Kiara luxury sport utility vehicle. The same vehicle the company leased for her to maintain her pristine image as a successful chief executive officer. I knew for a fact that the lease payment on that car had bounced 2 days ago. They were driving a repossessed vehicle to a bankruptcy meeting, but their posture suggested they were royalty gracing my building with their presence. Liam walked through the revolving glass doors first. He was wearing his best navy blue suit, carrying a slim leather briefcase that I knew was completely empty of any actual leverage. He was trying his absolute best to project the relaxed confidence of a seasoned executive, but I could see the tension radiating through his shoulders. He kept adjusting his tie, smoothing his lapels, and looking around the massive modern lobby with wide eyes. He was a man walking to the guillotine, trying to convince the crowd he was just there for a haircut. Kiara followed closely behind him. She was wearing a designer cream dress, holding her expensive handbag in front of her like a defensive shield. Her usual confident stride was replaced by a stiff, nervous walk. She looked around the pristine white marble and brushed steel of the Aura Analytics lobby, and I could see the intimidation instantly settle over her features. She had always operated in antique boardrooms with dark wood paneling and country club aesthetics. The sheer modern scale of my tech empire was clearly overwhelming her before she even reached the front desk. My mother, Denise, walked in last. Even in the face of total financial ruin, Denise could not turn off her desperate need to feel superior. I watched on the silent video feed as she approached my security personnel. She held her head high, her nose slightly turned up, radiating that practiced high society arrogance. She was likely demanding immediate attention, treating the building staff like her personal servants. She truly believed she was about to walk upstairs and charm a room full of anonymous venture capitalists into handing her a multi-million-dollar golden parachute. "They are absolutely terrified," Jackson noted, leaning over my shoulder to look at the screen. "Look at your brother-in-law. He is sweating through his jacket." I watched as the security guard handed them their temporary visitor badges. The guard pointed them toward the private executive elevators bank, reserved strictly for my floor. The camera feed seamlessly switched to the interior of the elevator cab as the three of them stepped inside and the heavy metal doors slid shut. Now they were completely alone, unobserved by the public, and the fragile facade immediately cracked. Without audio, I could only watch their body language, but it told a perfect story. Liam pulled a handkerchief from his pocket and wiped a heavy layer of sweat from his forehead. Kiara snapped something at him, pointing an angry finger at his chest, clearly giving him last-minute instructions or blaming him for their current terror. Liam argued back, his face turning red, throwing his hands up in defense. Meanwhile, Denise stood in the back of the elevator, staring into the reflective metal doors, while her daughter and son-in-law engaged in a silent, vicious argument over their collapsing future. My mother was busy fixing her hair. She was adjusting her pearl necklace and smoothing her lipstick. It was the perfect encapsulation of her entire existence. The ship was sinking, the water was freezing, and she was worried about how she would look when she drowned. The elevator numbers ticked upward on the screen. 37, 38, 39, 40. The doors slid open and the camera feed switched to the executive reception area of Aura Analytics. I watched my family step off the elevator and walk into the heart of my empire. The reception area was a massive open-concept space with floor-to-ceiling glass walls overlooking the entire developer floor. Dozens of data scientists, brand strategists, and software engineers were moving quickly through the corridors, collaborating at interactive smartboards, and operating at a level of efficiency that my family firm could never comprehend. Liam stopped walking. Kiara froze beside him. They just stared at the massive humming machine of my company. They had walked in expecting to find a boutique investment firm. Instead, they found a thriving technological fortress. I could see the absolute crushing realization hitting Liam in real time. I was looking at an operation he could never successfully manage or comprehend, even if he spent a lifetime trying. My executive receptionist greeted them with a polite professional smile. She escorted them past the glass developer bays, down the long corridor, and directly into the primary holding room, just outside the main boardroom. Keep them in there, I instructed Gabrielle, my voice perfectly calm. Do not offer them anything but water. Let them sit in that room for exactly 15 minutes. Let the silence do the work. Gabrielle nodded and stepped out of my office to manage the delay. Jackson walked over to my desk and set down 3 heavy black leather binders. These are the final asset purchase agreements, Jackson said, tapping the binders with his index finger. The terms are exactly as you requested. We are offering them a cash buyout equal to exactly 90% of their immediate hidden liabilities. We are leaving them with enough debt to severely sting, but not enough to trigger a federal bankruptcy investigation that could complicate the transfer of the digital assets. We are taking the client lists. Client lists the intellectual property, the office hardware, and the proprietary branding rights. They walk away with absolutely nothing but their personal freedom. I traced my fingers over the textured leather of the binders. It was a brutal contract. It was a corporate execution designed to strip them of the very thing they valued most, their prestige. Once they signed these papers, Anderson Public Relations would be completely dissolved. They would no longer be chief executive officers or vice presidents or founders. They would just be 3 unemployed people sitting in a leased mansion they could no longer afford. Are you absolutely certain you want to play it this cold? Jackson asked, watching my face carefully. Once we open those doors, there is no turning back. They are going to lose everything today. I looked up at Jackson. I thought about the quarterly meeting last Friday. I thought about Liam sliding that organizational chart across the table, telling me to be a team player while stealing my clients. I thought about Kiara telling me I lacked the vision to lead the very department I created. I thought about Denise calling me a failure, threatening to cut me off, and demanding that I sacrifice my sanity to save their public image. I have never been more certain of anything in my entire life, I replied. The digital clock on my desk flashed 10:15 in the morning. The 15 minutes were up. My family had been sitting in the holding room, stewing in their own anxiety, marinating in the terror of their financial reality. It was time to put them out of their misery. I stood up from my ergonomic chair and smoothed the fabric of my crimson blazer. I picked up the 3 black leather binders, stacking them neatly in my arms. Jackson stood to my right, adjusting his suit jacket. Gabrielle returned to the office and took her position on my left. Let us go meet the sellers, I said. I walked out of my office with my 2 most trusted executives flanking me. My heart rate was perfectly steady. My breathing was deep and controlled. For 33 years, my mother made me feel like I was taking up too much space. For 8 years, my sister stole my achievements and paraded them around as her own. For one agonizing week, my brother-in-law tried to erase my value completely to stroke his unearned ego. They had spent a lifetime building a cage for me, expecting me to sit quietly inside it and hand them the keys to my brilliance. But they were in my house now. They were standing on the top floor of my building, surrounded by my employees, breathing my air. The illusion of their superiority was about to violently collide with the reality of my dominance. We reached the heavy double-glass doors of the main boardroom. Through the frosted privacy strip in the center of the glass, I could see the hazy outlines of my family shifting nervously in their seats. I placed my hand on the brushed steel handle of the boardroom door, pushing the cold metal forward. I pushed the heavy glass door forward and stepped into the room. Jackson and Gabrielle followed in perfect synchronization, taking their places on either side of me. The main boardroom of Aura Analytics was a masterpiece of modern corporate design. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered an unobstructed panoramic view of the entire Atlanta skyline. The table was a massive slab of polished black granite surrounded by ergonomic executive chairs. It was cold, efficient, and deeply intimidating. My family was sitting clustered together near the middle of the table. Jasmine was perched on the edge of her seat, tapping her manicured fingernails against the stone surface. Liam was checking his expensive watch, his leg bouncing with nervous energy. Denise was staring out the window, likely practicing the charming smile she planned to use on the phantom investors she thought she was meeting. When they heard the heavy glass door click shut behind us, they all turned their heads simultaneously. I watched the exact moment their brains tried to process my presence. It was a beautiful sequence of confusion, annoyance, and ultimate indignation. They looked at my tailored crimson suit. They looked at the two sharp executives flanking me, and their minds completely short-circuited. They simply could not compute the data in front of them. Jasmine stood up immediately. Her chair scraped loudly against the floor, breaking the pristine silence of the room. "Chloe, what on earth are you doing here?" Jasmine demanded, her voice echoing off the glass walls. "Did you follow us? This is a highly confidential corporate meeting. You need to leave right now before I call security and have you thrown out." My mother Denise let out a sharp gasp, placing a hand over her pearl necklace. Her eyes darted around the room as if expecting actual executives to emerge from the shadows. "I cannot believe you tracked us down," she hissed, her face twisting with embarrassment. "Have you no shame at all? We are about to negotiate a multi-million-dollar merger, and you decide to crash it to beg for your job back. Get out of here before you ruin this for us. You are embarrassing the family name." Liam actually let out a condescending laugh. He leaned back in his chair, crossing his arms over his chest. He looked at Jasmine with a smug, knowing smile. "I told you she would come crawling back," he said, shaking his head. "But this is just pathetic, Chloe. We are meeting with the executive board of Aura Analytics in about 30 seconds. If you want a job as a coordinator, you can wait down in the lobby, and we will review your resume after we secure our buyout." I did not say a single word. I let them speak. I let them build their own trap with their arrogance. I walked slowly down the length of the long granite table. The clicking of my heels against the floor sounded like a ticking clock marking the final seconds of their corporate existence. I reached the head of the table, the seat reserved strictly for the presiding executive. I placed the three heavy black leather binders down on the polished stone. The thud echoed through the large room, silencing my family instantly. Jackson stood to my right, opening his slim leather briefcase. Gabrielle stood to my left, pulling up the digital projection screen on the wall behind me, using her tablet. "Sit down, Jasmine," I said, my voice low, calm, and entirely devoid of the sisterly deference I had used my entire life. "Excuse me," she snapped, her eyes flashing with anger. "You do not give me orders. You do not even work for us anymore. I am calling the front desk right now to have you escorted out." She reached into her designer handbag to grab her phone. "I would not advise that," Jackson stated smoothly. His voice carried the absolute authority of a man who held every legal card in the deck. "As building security reports directly to my client, setting off an alarm will only result in your own removal from the premises." Liam frowned, looking from Jackson to Gabrielle, and finally landing his gaze on me. "Your client," Liam repeated, the confusion clearly visible on his sweating face. "Who are you people? Where is the executive board we are supposed to be negotiating with?" I unbuttoned my crimson blazer and took my seat at the head of the table. I folded my hands there, resting them on top of the black leather binders. I mirrored the exact posture Liam had used against me just a few weeks ago when he slid that new organizational chart across the table. "You are looking at the executive board, Liam," I said, staring directly into his panicked eyes. "I am Chloe, and I am the founder and chief executive officer of Aura Analytics." The silence that followed was absolute. It was a suffocating, heavy vacuum that sucked all the oxygen out of the room. I watched my mother face drain of all color. Her jaw literally dropped open, her hand falling away from her pearls. Jasmine froze, completely paralyzed, her hand still hovering over her open purse. Liam blinked rapidly, his brain completely failing to reconcile the woman he had belittled with the tech giant he was currently begging for financial salvation. "This is a sick joke," Denise whispered, her voice trembling as she stared at me. "You do not own a tech company. You are a public relations worker. You do not have the money or the connections to build something like this. You are playing a trick on us." "I was a senior account director, Mom," I corrected her smoothly. "And I built this company over the last 4 years, while you and Jasmine were taking credit for my long nights and weekends. While you were hosting country club dinners, I was securing government contracts and writing proprietary code. The software your firm relied on for the past 2 years belonged to me. I built it. I own the licenses. And when I walked out of your boardroom, I took it all with me." Jasmine sank slowly back into her leather chair. The reality of the situation was finally penetrating her thick layer of denial. Her eyes darted to the Aura Analytics logo embossed on the glass doors, and then back to the confident executive standing by my side. You are Aura Analytics, she muttered, staring at the black binders on the table as if they were venomous snakes. You are the one who took Vanguard Lifestyle. You took Horizon Tech. You stole our clients. I did not steal anything, Jasmine, I replied, my tone perfectly measured and cold. They left because your husband is completely incompetent. They left because without my data, they realized your firm is nothing but an empty shell running on vanity. They reached out to my company because I am the only one who actually knows how to run their campaigns. They followed the talent. You just failed to realize that the talent was sitting right in front of you the entire time. Liam leaned forward, gripping the edge of the table. His knuckles were turning white against the black stone. Wait, he stammered, a look of pure, unadulterated terror washing over his features. The emails, the acquisition proposal. We sent our financials to your legal team. You have been the one reading our internal numbers all week. Yes, Liam. I smiled, leaning forward to meet his gaze. I have read every single line of your fraudulent financial disclosures. I know exactly how much debt you are in. I know exactly how close you are to total bankruptcy. I know that you lied about your projected revenue, and I know exactly why you are sitting in my building right now begging for a lifeline. You tricked us! Denise cried out, her voice rising in pitch. You lured your own family here to humiliate us. You are a spiteful, vindictive girl. I always knew there was something wrong with you. I did not lure anyone, Mom. I said, my voice remaining perfectly calm against her rising hysteria. Liam sent the email begging for a buyout. He reached out to my company. I simply opened the door and let you walk into the reality you created. I reached out and opened the first black binder. I flipped to the first page, which displayed a comprehensive breakdown of their impending financial collapse printed in stark black and white. You came here today, expecting to find a group of anonymous investors willing to hand you a multi-million-dollar golden parachute. I said, my voice ringing with finality. You expected to sell the family legacy, walk away rich, and continue living your lavish lifestyles without ever facing the consequences of your incompetence. But you are not dealing with anonymous investors today. You are dealing with the woman you tried to bury. I tapped my finger on the open binder. We are going to go through these numbers line by line. We are going to discuss exactly what your company is actually worth, and then you are going to listen to my offer. I opened the first black leather binder on the table and let the heavy cover fall flat against the granite. The sound echoed in the silent room like a gavel striking a judge block. I looked at Gabrielle and gave her a slight nod. Gabrielle tapped the screen of her tablet. The massive digital monitor mounted on the wall behind me instantly illuminated, bathing the dark boardroom in a harsh, bright light. A highly detailed multi-page spreadsheet appeared on the screen. The numbers were displayed in stark, unforgiving colors. There was an overwhelming amount of red ink bleeding across the digital columns. I looked at my family. Their eyes were glued to the screen. They were staring at the unfiltered, unedited autopsy of Anderson Public Relations. For the past week, Liam has been sending our legal department what he claimed were your updated corporate financials. I began, my voice ringing with absolute authority. He submitted documents projecting millions of dollars in future revenue. He categorized your firm as an expanding legacy brand, looking for a strategic partnership. But I am not an anonymous venture capitalist, Liam. I am the woman who built your data infrastructure. I know how to look past the smoke and mirrors. I tapped my finger on the open binder in front of me. You do not have a legacy brand. You have a massive, sinking liability. My mother Denise slammed her hand onto the table. Her face was flushed with a mixture of profound embarrassment and furious denial. You have no right to display our private financial information like this, Chloe, she demanded. This is a private family business. You are violating our privacy. Shut that screen off right now. I leaned forward, resting my arms on the table. You gave up your right to privacy the moment your son-in-law emailed these numbers to my acquisitions portal begging for a multi-million-dollar bailout, Mom. You walked into my building to sell me a company. I am simply conducting my due diligence as the buyer. I turned my attention back to the screen, grabbing a digital laser pointer from the table. Let us start with your operational overhead, I said, pointing the red dot at the top of the spreadsheet. For the past 2 years, I repeatedly warned you that leasing the 30th floor of a downtown high-rise was a vanity project you could not afford. But you insisted it was necessary for your social standing. You are currently paying $40,000 a month for empty office space. Add in your leased luxury vehicles, your country club memberships billed as networking expenses, and your catered executive lunches. Your monthly burn rate is astronomical. Jasmine crossed her arms over her chest, her tailored white suit suddenly looking stiff and uncomfortable. That is standard corporate overhead for a firm of our prestige, she argued, trying to sound like the confident chief executive officer she pretended to be. We have the revenue to support those expenses. You had the revenue, Jasmine, I corrected her sharply. You had Vanguard Lifestyle. You had Horizon Tech. You had Sterling Hospitality. You survived purely because my division generated enough capital to fund your lavish lifestyle. But those clients are gone. They are sitting in my portfolio now. Without them, your incoming revenue for this quarter is exactly zero. I clicked a button on the remote, and the screen transitioned to a new document. It was a copy of a commercial loan application. Jasmine's face suddenly dropped. The defensive posture vanished, replaced by raw, unadulterated panic. Her eyes widened as she recognized the document projected on the wall. Let us talk about your leadership, Jasmine. I continued, my voice slicing through the tension in the room. 3 months ago, you applied for a $2 million commercial line of credit from First Atlanta Bank. You claimed you needed the capital to expand the traditional media division. In the application, you provided client retention metrics and quarterly digital impressions to prove the company was solvent. I took a slow breath, letting the silence build. I pulled the original data logs from my server last night. The numbers you submitted to the bank were completely fabricated. You inflated the client engagement metrics by over 300% to secure that loan. You do not know what you are talking about, Jasmine stammered, her voice shaking. She looked at our mother seeking validation, but Denise was staring at the screen in absolute horror. I know exactly what I am talking about, I replied, because I am the one who wrote the algorithms that track those metrics. You altered the final reports before sending them to the loan officers. That is not just bad business, Jasmine. That is federal bank fraud. You used falsified data to secure a multi-million-dollar line of credit that you have already burned through. Liam jumped out of his chair, pointing an angry finger at me. You hacked our systems, he yelled, trying to go on the offensive to protect his wife. You stole our private corporate data. We can have you arrested for corporate espionage, Chloe. You are going to jail. Jackson, my lead corporate attorney, let out a dry, humorless laugh. He leaned back in his chair and looked up at Liam with an expression of pure legal pity. Sit down, Liam, Jackson instructed, his voice dripping with condescension. My client did not hack anything. As the sole proprietor of the software licenses your firm was using, she simply accessed her own proprietary data logs. The only person facing a prison sentence in this room is your wife for submitting fraudulent documents to a federally insured bank. Liam sank back into his chair, his chest heaving as he struggled to process the reality of their situation. He ran a trembling hand through his hair. Denise was clutching her pearl necklace, staring at Jasmine with an expression of pure disgust. The pristine, flawless image of her golden child was unraveling right before her eyes. But I was not finished. The true rot inside their company went much deeper than Jasmine vanity and fraud. I clicked the remote one more time. The screen shifted to a detailed ledger of the company outgoing wire transfers for the past 6 months. I highlighted a specific row of recurring payments. The vendor was listed as Apex Consulting Group. Now let us talk about the brilliant financial mind of our new Vice President of Strategy, I said, turning my gaze entirely to Liam. Liam's eyes locked onto the screen. I watched the blood literally drain from his face. His skin turned a pale, sickly shade of gray. He opened his mouth to speak, but absolutely no sound came out. He looked like a man who had just stepped on a landmine and heard the click. When you sent your financial disclosures to my acquisitions team, you categorized these outgoing wire transfers as operational consulting fees, I explained, projecting my voice so every syllable rang clearly across the granite table. You have wired exactly $150,000 to Apex Consulting Group over the past 6 months. Jasmine frowned, looking away from her own fraudulent loan documents to stare at the screen. "What is Apex Consulting?" she asked, her voice thick with confusion. "Liam, what is she talking about? What consulting fees?" Liam swallowed hard, a bead of sweat, tracing a line down his temple. "It is just a vendor, Jasmine. It is a third-party research firm I hired to help with market analysis. Chloe is just trying to confuse you." I smiled a tight, dangerous smile. "A market analysis firm," I repeated. "That is fascinating, Liam. Because when my legal team ran a routine background check on your listed vendors, we discovered that Apex Consulting Group is not a marketing firm. It is an offshore shell company registered in the Cayman Islands." Jasmine turned to look at her husband, her eyes narrowing. "Liam, what did you do?" "I will tell you exactly what he did, Jasmine," I said, refusing to let him control the narrative for a single second. "Your husband has a massive gambling addiction. He has been funneling company money to an offshore sports betting syndicate to cover his personal debts. He used the firm payroll accounts to hide the wire transfers." The silence in the boardroom was absolute. It was so profound I could hear the faint hum of the city traffic 40 floors below. Jasmine stared at Liam, her mouth hanging slightly open. The perfect, flawless marriage my mother loved to brag about, at her country club dinners, was detonating right in front of my eyes. "Tell me she is lying," Jasmine whispered, her voice cracking. "Tell me you did not steal $150,000 from my company to pay a bookie." Liam could not meet her eyes. He stared down at his expensive leather shoes, his silence acting as a total and complete confession. He had drained their operating capital to save his own skin, leaving the company entirely exposed when the client retainers disappeared. "You fool!" Denise shrieked, suddenly finding her voice. She slammed her hands on the table, glaring at Liam with a level of hatred I had never seen her direct at anyone but me. "You stole from us. You ruined my husband's legacy to pay for your disgusting habits. I let you into my family and you destroyed us." Denise turned her furious gaze to Jasmine. "And you," she screamed, pointing a manicured finger at her golden child. "You committed bank fraud. You lied to me. You told me the business was thriving. You told me giving Liam the promotion was a brilliant strategy. You are both completely worthless." I sat at the head of the table watching them tear each other apart. The facade was completely gone. The polite society manners, the arrogant corporate posturing, the illusion of their superiority, it had all been burned away by the harsh, blinding light of the truth. They were not powerful executives. They were just desperate, fraudulent people drowning in a mess of their own creation. I let them argue for another 2 minutes, watching the destruction of their toxic dynamic. Then I picked up the first black leather binder and dropped it heavily onto the center of the granite table. "That is enough," I commanded, my voice slicing through their bickering. They all snapped their heads toward me, breathing heavily, their faces flushed with anger and shame. They suddenly remembered exactly where they were and who held the power. "Your company is completely worthless," I stated plainly. "You are drowning in commercial debt, you have committed federal fraud, and you have embezzled from your own payroll. You have absolutely no leverage. You have no clients. You have no future." I unclasped the leather binder, opening it to reveal a thick stack of legal contracts. I pulled a silver pen from my pocket and laid it precisely on top of the documents. "I am not going to buy your company," I said, looking at the 3 broken people sitting across from me. "I am not going to save your legacy, but I am going to make you an offer. And it is the only offer that keeps you out of a federal prison cell." The silence that followed my ultimatum hung over the granite table like a thick, suffocating fog. Liam was the first to break it. He swallowed hard, his Adam apple bobbing above his tight collar. He reached up and loosened his expensive silk tie, finally abandoning the polished executive persona he had tried so desperately to maintain. He leaned forward, resting his forearms on the table, trying to project a sense of mutual corporate understanding. "Okay, Chloe, Liam," said his voice raspy and uneven. "Let us be reasonable here. We are all business professionals. I admit the optics of the consulting fees look bad, and the Vanguard situation was a miscalculation. But our public relations firm is still a legacy brand in Atlanta. We have 30 years of community trust built into our name. We have a robust contact list and established vendor relationships. We are willing to step away and let Aura Analytics absorb the firm, but we need a fair market valuation for the buyout. I stared at him, letting his ridiculous speech hang in the air. Jasmine immediately chimed in, desperately clinging to her sinking ship. She straightened her posture, trying to channel her mother high society arrogance. Liam is right, she stated. Despite the temporary cash flow issues, our brand recognition alone is worth millions. We are prepared to authorize a full acquisition of our corporate entity for $5 million. That covers the bank loan, the outstanding vendor debts, and leaves us with a proper severance package for stepping down. Jackson, my lead corporate attorney, let out a low sound that was halfway between a cough and a laugh. Gabrielle, my head of operations, did not even blink. She just stared at Jasmine with a look of pure clinical pity. I leaned back in my leather chair, crossing my legs. You are deeply confused about your position in this room, Jasmine, I said, my voice echoing off the glass walls. I am not buying your corporate entity. I am not acquiring your public relations firm. Liam frowned, his brow furrowing in confusion. What are you talking about? The email from your legal team specifically requested an acquisition meeting. I requested an asset purchase meeting, Liam. I corrected him smoothly. I am not buying your company because your company is a toxic liability. Your brand recognition is entirely worthless. The Atlanta public relations circuit already knows you are bleeding clients and bouncing checks. By Monday morning, the entire industry will know about your fraudulent loan and your offshore gambling debts. Your name is a poison pill, and I would not attach it to my tech empire if you paid me. Denise clutched her chest, looking back and forth between me and her golden child. If you are not buying the company, then what exactly are we doing here? She demanded, her voice shrill with rising panic. I am buying the scrap metal, Mom, I replied, looking directly into her terrified eyes. I am acquiring your physical servers, your client databases, your remaining intellectual property, and your office hardware. I am stripping the copper out of the walls of your burning house and leaving the shell to collapse. I reached out and opened the black leather binder resting in front of me. I pulled out a thick stack of legal contracts printed on heavy premium paper. I slid the stack across the smooth granite surface. The documents glided perfectly, coming to a stop directly in front of Liam's sweating hands. Look at the purchase price on page 1, I instructed. Liam looked down at the documents. He flipped past the cover page and his eyes scanned the text. I watched his face closely. I watched the exact second his brain registered the number printed on the contract. He physically recoiled, jerking back in his chair as if the paper had burned his fingers. You have got to be kidding me, Liam breathed, shaking his head in absolute disbelief. This is a joke. This is insulting. Jasmine leaned over and snatched the contract from in front of him. She read the number and let out a sharp, breathless gasp. $350,000. Jasmine read aloud, her voice cracking on the final syllable. Are you out of your mind, Chloe? Our office furniture alone cost more than that. The computers, the software licenses, the client lists. You cannot offer us $350,000 for our entire operation. That does not even cover a fraction of the commercial lease penalty. That is exactly right, Jasmine, I said, leaning forward again. It does not cover your commercial lease. It does not cover the unpaid caterers, the luxury car leases, or the country club dues you billed to the company card. I pointed to the documents in her hand. That number covers exactly two things, I explained, my voice perfectly level and ruthlessly precise. First, it covers the remaining balance of the fraudulent commercial loan you secured from First Atlanta Bank. Second, it covers the exact amount Liam owes to the offshore sports betting syndicate. I paused, letting the reality of their situation settle into their bones. I am offering you exactly enough cash to prevent the federal government from prosecuting you for bank fraud and to prevent Liam bookies from showing up at your front door to collect their debt. Not a single penny more. You walk away with your physical freedom, but you walk away completely broke. Denise let out a sound that was something between a sob and a scream. She stood up from her chair, her hands trembling violently. You cannot do this to us, Chloe. Denise shouted, her high society facade completely destroyed. You are talking about leaving us with nothing. We will lose the house in Buckhead. We will lose the cars. We will be bankrupt. You are my daughter. You are supposed to protect this family. You have millions of dollars sitting in your company accounts. You can afford to give us a proper buyout. You owe us. I owe you absolutely nothing, Mom, I replied, my voice dropping to a cold, deadly whisper. You told me I was a failure. You told me I lacked the grace and the vision to sit at this table. You threatened to cut me out of the family and destroy my reputation in this city if I did not sacrifice my sanity to save Liam's job. I looked at Liam, who was staring blankly at the granite table, completely defeated. I looked at Jasmine, who was crying heavy mascara-stained tears. You tried to strip me of everything I built, I continued. You took my clients, you took my credit, and you tried to erase my value. I am simply holding up a mirror and letting you look at your own reflection. Jasmine slammed the contract down on the table. We are not signing this, she cried out, her voice thick with desperation. We will find another buyer. We will sell the client lists to a competitor. We will declare corporate bankruptcy and restructure the debt. We have options. Jackson, my lead corporate attorney, leaned forward, resting his elbows on the table. He looked at Jasmine with the calm, measured patience of a man explaining the law to a stubborn child. You have absolutely no options, Jasmine Jackson stated bluntly. Your client lists are worthless because the clients have already signed exclusive retainers with Aura Analytics. You cannot declare corporate bankruptcy without triggering a mandatory financial audit by the bank. The moment the bank auditors see your fabricated engagement metrics, they will refer your file to the federal authorities for criminal prosecution. Jackson tapped his pen against his notepad. Furthermore, the moment you declare bankruptcy, your commercial landlord will freeze your physical assets to recoup their losses. You will not even be allowed to take the computers out of the building. You have exactly zero leverage. You are standing on a trapdoor and my client is holding the lever. Liam buried his face in his hands. He let out a long, ragged breath. He knew Jackson was right. He knew his gambling debts were a ticking time bomb, and he knew he had completely destroyed his wife company to hide his incompetence. This is not a negotiation, I said, bringing the focus back to me. This is an execution. You sign those asset purchase agreements right now, and I transfer the funds directly to the bank and the offshore accounts. You avoid a federal indictment and you walk out of this building with your freedom. If you refuse, I withdraw the offer completely. The bank will find out about the fraud by Monday morning, and you can explain your legacy brand to a judge. I reached into my pocket and pulled out a sleek silver pen. I set it down on top of the contract. The silence in the boardroom was heavy and absolute. The only sound was the jagged, panicked breathing of my sister and the quiet sobs of my mother. They were completely trapped. The massive golden parachute they had expected had evaporated into thin air, replaced by a brutal, punishing reality check. I sat back in my chair watching them process the end of their corporate lives. I did not feel a single ounce of pity. I had spent my entire adult life trying to earn their respect, trying to prove my worth, and trying to save them from their own terrible decisions. Now I was finally prioritizing my own peace. I looked at the silver pen resting on the contract. You have exactly 5 minutes to sign those documents, I stated, my voice echoing with finality. After that, the offer expires and you can handle the fallout yourselves. The silence in the boardroom was heavy and absolute. The only sound was the jagged, panicked breathing of my sister and the quiet sobs of my mother. They were completely trapped. The massive golden parachute they had expected had evaporated into thin air, replaced by a brutal, punishing reality check. I sat back in my chair watching them process the end of their corporate lives. I did not feel a single ounce of pity. I had spent my entire adult life trying to earn their respect, trying to prove my worth, and trying to save them from their own terrible decisions. Now I was finally prioritizing my own peace. I looked at the silver pen resting on the contract. You have exactly 5 minutes to sign those documents, I stated, my voice echoing with finality. After that, the offer expires and you can handle the fallout yourselves. Jasmine stared at the contract and the reality of her total defeat finally broke through her arrogance. Her face crumpled and she burst into loud, theatrical tears. I had seen this exact performance 1,000 times before. Growing up, whenever she was caught in a lie or wanted to manipulate our mother into getting her way, she would produce these massive, desperate sobs. She leaned across the polished granite table, her hands clasped together in a pleading gesture. "Chloe, please, you cannot do this to me," she cried, her voice cracking with manufactured emotion. "We are sisters. We share the same blood. You cannot leave me with absolutely nothing." I will lose my house. I will lose my entire life. We are family, and family is supposed to protect each other. I looked at her tears and felt absolutely nothing. The emotional manipulation that used to control me had completely lost its power. You did not care about our blood when you sat in this exact same type of boardroom and told me I was not good enough to lead the department I built. I replied, my voice completely steady. You did not care about being my sister when you initiated a smear campaign and sent emails to 50 executives accusing me of embezzlement. You tried to destroy my professional reputation so I would be forced to crawl back to you. You do not get to weaponize our family bond only when you are the one facing the consequences of your own actions. Jasmine opened her mouth to argue, but the words died in her throat. She looked at Liam seeking some kind of support, but her husband was entirely broken. He was staring blankly at the wall, completely paralyzed by the realization that his offshore gambling debts and his corporate fraud had finally caught up to him. When my mother realized that Jasmine had absolutely no leverage left, she did something that truly turned my stomach. Denise wiped the tears from her own eyes, straightened her posture, and completely changed her strategy. She had always aligned herself with whoever held the most power in the room. For my entire life, that person had been Jasmine. But today, the power belonged to me. Denise looked at me with a soft, sickeningly sweet smile. She reached across the table and tried to place her hand over mine, but I pulled my hand away before she could make contact. Chloe, my sweet girl, Denise said, her voice dripping with a fake maternal warmth that made my skin crawl. I always knew you had a brilliant mind. I always knew you were destined for incredible things. You have built an absolute empire here. It is breathtaking. I stared at her, letting her spin her web of lies. You are just like your father, she continued, her eyes wide with feigned admiration. He would be so incredibly proud of the business you have created. And you know what, I think we could make this work. I have decades of experience in high society networking. I know everyone in Atlanta. You need someone to handle client relations and elite event planning. Let me come work for you, Chloe. I can be a senior consultant for Aura Analytics. We can build this legacy together, just mother and daughter. Jackson, my attorney, let out a quiet sigh of disbelief. Gabrielle crossed her arms over her chest, staring at my mother with open disgust. I looked at the woman who had birthed me. I looked at the woman who had spent 33 years making me feel like I was taking up too much space. You want a position in my company? I asked, keeping my tone perfectly conversational. Yes, Denise nodded eagerly, entirely misreading my calmness for compliance. I could bring so much value to your brand. We could be an unstoppable team. 2 weeks ago, you sat at your formal dining room table and told me I was a failure. I said, my voice dropping to a cold, hard register. You told me I would never survive in the corporate world without your handouts. You told me I lacked the grace and the polish to sit at an executive table. You threatened to cut me out of the family if I did not sacrifice my sanity to save Liam's job. Denise swallowed hard, her fake smile trembling at the edges. I was just frustrated, Chloe. I was trying to push you to reach your full potential. You were trying to keep me beneath you, I corrected her sharply. You do not want a job at my company, Mom. You just want access to my bank account because yours is completely empty. You want to attach your name to my success so you can keep bragging to your friends at the country club. But that is never going to happen. You will never set foot in my building again after today. Denise's face drained of color. The maternal mask shattered completely, leaving behind the bitter, terrified woman she truly was. She opened her mouth to scream at me, but Jackson tapped his watch. You have exactly 2 minutes left to sign the asset purchase agreements, Jackson announced, his voice echoing with legal finality. After that, the offer is permanently withdrawn, and I will personally notify First Atlanta Bank of the fraudulent loan documents. Liam was the first to break. He knew he was out of time. He knew he had to sign the papers to avoid a federal prison sentence for bank fraud and to pay off the dangerous offshore bookies he owed. He reached out with a trembling hand and picked up the silver pen I had left on the table. He did not look at his wife. He did not look at his mother-in-law. He flipped to the signature page of the contract and scrawled his name across the dotted line. Jasmine watched him sign the document that officially dissolved her title, her company, and her entire identity. The look of pure, unadulterated hatred she directed at her husband was chilling. In that exact moment, their marriage completely evaporated. The illusion of their perfect high society relationship was shattered beyond repair, destroyed by his incompetence and his hidden gambling debts. Jasmine snatched the pen from Liam's hand. She was weeping silently now, her tears ruining her expensive makeup. She signed her name, surrendering every single client, every piece of intellectual property, and every shred of her professional dignity. She shoved the contract toward Denise. My mother picked up the pen, her hands shaking so violently she could barely grip the silver medal. She signed her name, relinquishing the last remaining pieces of my father's public relations firm. They pushed the 3 black leather binders back across the granite table. Jackson collected them, verifying the signatures with a quick professional glance. He nodded at me, confirming that the transaction was legally binding and absolute. The funds will be wired directly to your commercial creditors and the specified offshore accounts within the hour, Jackson stated, closing his briefcase. You are officially relieved of your corporate debts, but Anderson Public Relations is now the sole property of Aura Analytics. I looked at Gabrielle. Please escort our guests to the lobby, I instructed. Gabrielle pressed a button on her communication earpiece. Less than 10 seconds later, the heavy glass doors of the boardroom swung open. 2 large, highly professional security guards stepped into the room. It is time to leave, Gabrielle said, gesturing toward the exit. My family stood up from the table. They looked entirely hollowed out. They had walked into my building expecting to use their privilege and their entitlement to secure a massive fortune. Instead, they were leaving with absolutely nothing but the clothes on their backs. Liam grabbed his empty briefcase and hurried out the door, keeping his head down to avoid looking at anyone. Jasmine followed him, her pristine white suit looking wrinkled and defeated. Denise lingered for just a moment. She looked at me, sitting at the head of the long granite table, surrounded by my loyal executives and the tech empire I had built with my own hands. She looked like she wanted to say something, to hurl one last insult or make one last plea. But she realized that her words had absolutely no power here. I was completely immune to her poison. She turned around and walked out, joining her ruined golden child in the hallway. I stood up and walked over to the floor-to-ceiling window. I looked down at the busy Atlanta streets far below. A few minutes later, I watched the 3 of them emerge onto the sidewalk. I watched the valet bring around Kiara's leased luxury vehicle. I knew the repossession agents would likely be seizing that car before the end of the week. I watched Liam and Jasmine get into the vehicle without speaking to each other, their toxic marriage entirely broken by the exposure of their mutual fraud. I watched my mother get into the back seat, her social standing completely obliterated. The car pulled away, merging into the heavy city traffic and disappearing from my view forever. I placed my hand against the cool glass of the window and took a deep, clean breath. The air in my office felt lighter, brighter, and infinitely more peaceful. For my entire life, I had carried the suffocating weight of their expectations. I had allowed them to minimize my brilliance to make themselves feel taller. I had endured their insults, their betrayals, and their endless demands for my loyalty. But I was finally free. I had not just survived their attempts to destroy me. I had strategically dismantled their entire facade and reclaimed every single thing they tried to steal from me. I had built a multi-million-dollar empire from the ground up, relying on nothing but my own intellect and my own relentless work ethic. I did not need their name to open doors for me because I owned the entire building. I turned away from the window and looked at Jackson and Gabrielle. They were smiling, both radiating a sense of profound professional triumph. We had a $4 million federal contract to manage and an entire industry to dominate. The toxic shadow of my family was permanently erased from my life, leaving behind nothing but an open, limitless horizon. I walked back to my desk, sat down in my chair, and got back to work. Lesson learned. The most profound lesson from this story is that your true value is not defined by the people who consistently underestimate you, even if those people happen to be your own family. You cannot force toxic individuals to respect your brilliance when they directly benefit from keeping you in their shadow. True empowerment begins the exact moment you stop seeking validation from those who exploit your hard work. By walking away from tables where respect is no longer served, You reclaim your energy to build your own empire. Ultimately, your greatest revenge and ultimate peace come from realizing your independence and thriving completely on your own terms. Call to action. If this story of reclaiming your power and setting firm boundaries resonated with you, please hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and share this video with someone who might need to be reminded of their own worth.